Hey guys, tonight we begin with a forgotten parade of strange old substances that once promised enlightenment, immortality, or, at the very least, a break from whatever disaster humanity had invented that week. You are about to slip into a world where healers, mystics, and very confused alchemists all agreed that the best way to solve a problem was to swallow something they definitely should not have found in a swamp. The past is full of odd decisions, and tonight, you get to relive them without the side effects. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You crouch at the edge of a swamp that has no business looking this alive. The air clings to your skin with a humid insistence, and the mud shifts beneath your feet like it wants to negotiate a long-term relationship. Prehistory is not glamorous. You have no pottery, no written language, and no idea what that buzzing creature near your ear plans to do next. What you do have is curiosity, the sort that has already convinced your small clan to taste, bark, lick stones, and sniff smoke that belonged in the sky rather than your lungs. You are a pioneer in a world that never asked for one. The swamp gurgles in front of you, releasing bubbles that rise lazily and pop with a smell that could charitably be described as earthy. Your people believe spirits live here. You are starting to suspect the spirits left after smelling this place once. Still, the elders insist that hidden somewhere among these reeds and pools is a plant that can turn fear into clarity and sadness into laughter. They also said the same thing about the glowing mushrooms last season, and that experiment ended with 3 hunters singing to a boulder until sunrise. No one remembers why. Tonight, you gather reeds, roots, and whatever strange plant dares to grow in this damp abyss. You do it because surviving on berries and optimism only gets you so far, and there is a quiet sense that nature might be hiding answers in its strangest corners. You mash the plants together with a stone, mixing them until they become a paste that shifts between green and a concerning shade of purple. You add swamp water despite every instinct begging you not to, but instincts have been losing arguments lately. The brew begins to bubble. It should not bubble. Nothing you have added is known to bubble. The elders say this is a sign of approval from the unseen world, though you suspect the unseen world is laughing behind your back. Still, you lean in close and inhale the steam rising from the mixture. It smells sharp and sweet, like flowers that lost a fight with a puddle. Your eyes water, your nose tingles, and suddenly the world tilts in a way that makes you question whether tilting is normal. You sip the liquid, just a drop. It hits your tongue with the force of a bad decision wrapped in a good idea. The taste is odd, warm, a little metallic, and somehow comforting. Your heartbeat slows. The swamp hums louder. The reeds sway in a pattern that looks almost intentional. The moon glows brighter, as if someone polished it while you were not looking. You blink, and the shadows seem to blink back. You know this should concern you, but concern feels far away, drifting like smoke toward another person's evening. You sit in the mud, feeling it mold itself to you, and for the first time you wonder if the earth itself might be whispering. You listen closely. You hear water, insects, and the faint rustle of something moving through the reeds. Everything feels connected, not in a philosophical way, more in a you and the swamp are having a conversation and the swamp has opinions sort of way. Time softens. You do not know if minutes pass or hours. You see shapes in the mist that might be ancestors or might be frogs wearing excellent posture. You laugh quietly. The sound echoes in a strangely round way, and the echo makes you laugh again. You feel warmth in your chest, a kind of ancient comfort that pushes aside the daily worries of predators and storms. For the first time in seasons, you feel safe. When the effects ease, you return to the world as it usually is. The swamp is only a swamp again. The reeds return to ordinary swaying. The moon resumes its familiar silver. but something has changed. You feel a thread of understanding, thin but real, tying you to the land that feeds you, frightens you, and now guides you. You scoop more of the strange plants into your pouch because you know the others will want this too, and not just for visions. The brew offers calm, focus, a rare moment when survival does not feel like a constant argument with nature. As you head back toward your camp, you glance over your shoulder. The swamp gurgles softly, almost like farewell. You breathe in the cool night air and walk on, the first of countless generations who will chase meaning through strange plants, curious mixtures, and the hope that somewhere in the wild world, answers might grow in the mud. You stand at the foot of a mountain that looks less like a piece of land and more like a deity with a temper. The ground is warm beneath your feet, warmer than any earth has a right to be, and the air carries a faint metallic taste that suggests you are about to inhale something your lungs never applied for. Your people whisper that the mountain breathes, and tonight you are here to breathe with it. You can already see thin wisps of vapor drifting from cracks in the stone, curling like pale fingers inviting you closer, or warning you. It is difficult to tell the difference. You follow the shaman, a figure wrapped in animal hides and soot, who walks with the confident wobble of someone who knows this ritual very well and possibly enjoys it too much. His hair is wild, his eyes are wide, and his face is painted with the earthy palette of a man who has mastered the art of looking unbothered while standing near an active volcano. He tells you this ritual will open the senses, sharpen the mind, and allow you to hear the voices of the ancestors. You suspect it will also allow you to hear several things that are not ancestors, but you keep that thought to yourself. The path narrows as you climb. The heat rises in waves, turning the night air into something thick enough to chew. You squeeze past jagged stones, each one radiating warmth that makes your skin prickle. The shaman stops at a ledge overlooking a pool of bubbling mud that pops in slow, deliberate bursts. He kneels with the solemnity of a man greeting an old friend and gestures for you to do the same. You obey, though your knees would prefer to be anywhere else. The vapor drifts toward you, gentle at first, then stronger, carrying an aroma you cannot fully describe. It smells like earth, smoke, and something unsettlingly sweet. You inhale slowly, because that is what the shaman expects, and expectations carry tremendous weight in a sacred ritual. The vapor wraps around your senses with surprising softness. The world sharpens, then softens again, shifting like a dream testing its boundaries. Your vision ripples at the edges as if the night sky is stretching itself awake. The stars seem brighter, more deliberate, like they are watching the ritual with interest. The shaman begins to chant. His voice is low, steady, and oddly comforting. His words vibrate through the air, weaving with the vapors in a way that makes you feel as though the entire mountain is humming. You close your eyes, and the darkness pulses in rhythm with the sound. When you open them, the vapor looks different. It flows in long ribbons that twist and loop in shapes you swear are purposeful. You lean closer to the pool, and the mud bubbles seem to match your breathing. There is a presence here, ancient and patient, watching you with the quiet curiosity of something that has seen countless rituals and countless mistakes. You do not feel afraid exactly, more suspended, as though the line between your body and the mountain is thinner than it used to be. The shaman's chant shifts. His voice rises and falls like a distant storm, carrying images into your mind with surprising clarity. You see your ancestors walking these same stones long before you. You see their faces, their painted skin, their confident steps as they inhaled these same vapors and spoke to the unseen world. The vision grows stronger, and suddenly you feel as if you are standing among them. Their movements blur with yours. Their thoughts brush the edges of your awareness. You understand, for a moment, why generations climbed this mountain despite the heat and danger. The vapor is not just smoke, it is memory, carved into the air by countless breaths. A warm breeze rolls across the ledge, carrying the scent of ash and something faintly floral. You blink, and the world steadies. The mountain looks the same as before, but you feel as though you have stepped through a thin curtain and returned with dust from the other side clinging to your thoughts. The shaman places a hand on your shoulder and nods, satisfied. You realize the ritual is not about the mountain speaking to you. It is about you learning how to listen. You rise slowly, your legs unsteady but your mind strangely clear. The vapor still curls around your skin, urging you to stay. But the shaman begins his descent, and you follow. The night air cools as you move away from the fissures. The stars return to their ordinary distance, though they feel more familiar now. When you reach the base of the mountain, you glance back one last time. A thin plume of vapor rises, drifting silently into the sky, carrying with it the remnants of a ritual older than any story your people tell. You breathe deeply, and the world feels just a little wider than it did before. You squat in the tall grass of the steppe, feeling the wind tug at your hair like an impatient teacher trying to get your attention. The land stretches in every direction, an ocean of gold and green that ripples beneath a sky so wide it feels like it might swallow you whole. Your people have no written words, no maps, and no interest in sitting still long enough to invent either. What you do have is fermented honey, which your clan insists is both medicine and miracle, depending on who is drinking it and how much they have already had. The jar sits in front of you, a round clay pot sealed with wax and smelling faintly of wildflowers and questionable life choices. It has been buried in the earth for many moons, tended like a secret, warmed by the sun, chilled by the night, and occasionally shaken by stampeding horses. The elders say this aging process improves the flavor. You suspect it simply gives whatever is happening inside the jar a chance to get more ambitious. Tonight you are part of your first honey ceremony, a rite your people claim was taught by a wandering spirit who enjoyed sweetness and chaos in equal measure. The clan gathers around a fire that crackles with the smell of sage and smoke. The sky turns copper as the sun sinks behind the hills. Laughing voices float across the air, growing louder as anticipation builds. Even the horses seem to sense that something unusual is about to happen, tossing their manes and snorting like impatient spectators. The shaman lifts the jar with a reverence usually reserved for newborns and especially good weather. He taps the wax seal with a carved bone, and it cracks with a soft, sticky sigh. Immediately, a fragrance escapes, thick and rich. It smells like summer trapped in a pot, sweet and floral, with a hint of something that makes your eyes widen and your instincts reconsider their career choices. The elders lean in eagerly. They have been waiting all season for this moment, and judging by the way they lick their lips, they plan to enjoy every bit of it. You are handed a cup carved from horn. The fermented honey pours into it in slow golden ribbons, glinting in the firelight. You lift it carefully, feeling the warmth of the liquid seep through the horn. The scent rises again, stronger, and for a moment you feel as if the entire steppe is blooming around you. You glance at the others, and they nod encouragingly, though their eyes carry the mischievous glimmer of people who have already accepted that tonight may become a story no one fully remembers. You take your first sip. The sweetness hits immediately, bright and soft, followed by a warmth that spreads through your chest like a small sun waking from a nap. Beneath the honey is a deeper flavor, earthy and wild, as if the drink contains the memory of every bee that helped create it. The taste lingers, curling around your senses with a strange, pleasant heaviness. The world sharpens. The fire glows brighter. The grass hums softly in the breeze. You breathe out, and the night seems to breathe with you. The shaman begins to chant, his voice rising in rhythmic waves that echo across the open land. The others join in, swaying to an invisible melody that thrums through the air. You take another sip, then another. The warmth grows into a full-body glow, as if someone wrapped you in a blanket woven from sunlight. The stars overhead blur into soft halos, shimmering with a gentle pulse. When you blink, the constellations seem to shift slightly, forming shapes you swear you have never noticed before. A horse rearing, a woman dancing, a serpent curling across the sky. The laughter around the fire grows louder, but it carries a softness that makes you feel safe. Someone begins to drum on a leather skin, the rhythm steady and grounding. The beat vibrates in your ribs, syncing with your breath. You look across the fire and catch the eye of an elder who has lived longer than any person in your clan. He smiles a slow, knowing smile and lifts his cup toward you. You mimic the gesture, feeling connected in a way that transcends words or stories. The honey seeps deeper into your limbs. Your thoughts drift like clouds across a summer sky. You feel close to the earth and the sky at once, held between them like a leaf cupped in gentle hands. The steppe stretches invincible beneath the moonlight, ancient and endless. It feels alive, not just as land, but as a presence, watching over you. You sense your ancestors here, moving through the grass, laughing at the same fire, drinking the same honey. Their footsteps echo faintly in the wind. When the night finally cools and the fire burns low, you sit quietly, the last sips of warmth fading from your cup. The world settles back into its ordinary shape, though something inside you feels permanently widened, softened, awakened. You rise, your body swaying slightly but your spirit steady. As the clan drifts toward their tents, you glance up once more at the wide sky. The stars look familiar again, but they also look friendlier, as if they now know your name. You walk through a forest that feels older than memory, its trees towering above you like silent archivists guarding secrets no one alive remembers. The air is cool and heavy with the scent of moss, and every footstep sinks softly into soil that has held centuries of footsteps before yours. You are here for a ritual few speak of aloud, a ceremony that belongs more to the dead than the living. The elders sent you into these woods not to hunt, not to gather, but to collect something quietly powerful tucked inside grave sites that your tribe treats as both sacred and mildly alarming. The burial mounds rise from the earth in gentle curves, covered in ferns and roots that curl around them like sleeping guardians. Your people believe the ancestors rest peacefully beneath these mounds, unless disturbed by disrespect or especially clumsy footsteps. You move slowly. You do not want to be the subject of a new cautionary tale. The moon filters through the canopy, its pale light resting on a cluster of stones arranged in careful shapes. You kneel and place your hand on the ground, whispering a greeting because the elders said it is polite and because politeness feels like a good idea around ancient spirits. The seeds lie inside small clay vessels buried with the dead. No one knows exactly who first placed them there or why. Some say they guide the soul in its journey. Others claim they were offerings to whatever lived beyond the veil. The shaman, of course, says they are a gift from the ancestors, meant to be shared with those who seek understanding. You suspect even he does not fully know. What you do know is that each tiny seed carries a strange shimmer when caught in the right light, as if it remembers something you never learned. You open the vessel with slow fingers. The clay cracks gently, the sound soft enough not to disturb the forest. Inside are the seeds, round and dark, with a faint metallic sheen. They smell earthy, sweet, and a little unsettling, like the essence of a dream that lingered too long. You take them carefully. You are not supposed to linger at the graves, but curiosity pulls you deeper. You wonder about the people buried here, what they felt, what they feared, what they hoped these seeds would help them see. By the time you return to camp, the fire burns low, and the shaman sits waiting with a calm expression that suggests he knew exactly how long the forest would keep you. He motions you to sit and places a bowl in your hands. The seeds are crushed into a fine powder and mixed with water until the liquid turns a cloudy gray that swirls like a storm trapped in a cup. You inhale the scent and feel a shiver crawl gently along your spine. The shaman nods, and you drink. The taste is sharper than expected, bitter at first, then warm, then oddly soothing. The fire shifts and blurs at the edges. The shadows around you stretch, soften, and begin to shape themselves into patterns you recognize but cannot explain. You blink slowly as the world leans into a deeper hue. The trees beyond the camp seem to sway with a rhythm more deliberate than wind. The stars pulse faintly, like distant lanterns signaling from another realm. Your heartbeat slows. You feel the ground beneath you, steady and alive, supporting you with a calm presence. The shaman begins to hum, a low sound that vibrates in your chest. The forest answers with rustles and distant calls. Then you see them, faint outlines moving through the trees, figures shaped like people but lighter, less anchored. They walk with steps that do not disturb the leaves, drifting between the trunks with quiet familiarity. One pauses near you. You cannot see a face, but you feel recognition, as if some ancient thread of your blood is pulling tight. A warmth spreads through you, softer than the fire, more profound than the drink. You feel stories unfolding inside your mind, memories that do not belong to you, visions of hunts, storms, births, and deaths across ages. You understand that the seeds do not show the future. They uncover the past, bringing voices forward through darkness. The figures remain only a moment, then fade as gently as mist touched by morning light. As the night deepens, the visions soften. The shaman's humming quiets. The seeds settle in your thoughts like embers glowing faintly. When dawn rises, you feel calm, grounded, and strangely guided. The grave sites no longer seem distant or frightening. They feel connected to you, as if the forest whispered something you will spend your life interpreting. You rise slowly, the world clear again, the fire crackling in soft greeting. The seeds remain tucked in your pouch, their mystery unchanged, their purpose now a part of you. You walk into the new day, knowing you carry a thread of forgotten tribes within you, woven through your senses like a quiet, ancient song. You stand at the edge of a village that barely qualifies as one, a scattering of huts made from reeds and mud, arranged in a way that suggests the builders were aiming for a circle and ended up with a polite oval. The people here are the first in your lineage bold enough to settle in one place instead of chasing animals across half a continent. They plant seeds in the soil, watch them grow, and fiercely insist that this is better than wandering, even though they spend most days arguing with goats and trying to convince the river not to flood their homes. In the center of the settlement is the smoke pit, a shallow bowl dug into the earth and lined with stones that have seen more rituals than you have eaten dinners. The farmers call it the place where the earth exhales. You call it the place where the elders pretend to know what they are doing. It sits near a cluster of grain stores, as if the community wants to keep all its mysteries in one convenient location. Tonight, you approach it with a mixture of curiosity, caution, and a quiet hope that the experience will not end with you stumbling into a basket of millet. The pit smells odd even before the fire starts, a blend of dried herbs, roots, and something that might once have been a plant but now looks like it chose chaos as a retirement plan. The old women preparing the mixture work with quick, practiced hands. They crush leaves with stones, sprinkle in powders from gourds, and mutter instructions to the younger helpers who nod solemnly, despite clearly having no idea what is happening. One of them hands you a handful of brittle stalks and tells you to drop them into the pit when instructed, as if this single act will determine your fate. As night falls, the community gathers around. Children dart between the adults, wide-eyed with excitement, while dogs circle hopefully. Confused but committed to participating, the sky deepens into a shade of blue that looks like water blended with ink. The first spark is struck, and flame catches on the dried kindling. Smoke rises quickly, thick and fragrant, its scent drifting through the air like a question you have no answer for. The shaman steps forward. He looks younger than most shamans you have seen, which means he has probably only survived a handful of seasons worth of rituals and unexpected wildlife encounters. He raises his hands and begins a chant that sounds halfway between a blessing and a gentle scolding directed at the earth. The villagers sway to his rhythm. Humming under their breath, you feel the anticipation settling over the gathering like a warm blanket. The smoke thickens. It curls upward in slow spirals, dense enough to touch but light enough to dance. When you inhale, it tastes like bitter roots softened by a hint of sweetness, and your lungs prickle with an unfamiliar warmth. The shaman throws in another handful of herbs, and the smoke shifts color slightly, taking on a faint shimmer that catches the firelight. You lean closer, drawn by the sight, though every instinct in your body quietly reminds you that leaning over unknown vapors has historically been unwise. Your vision begins to soften around the edges. The villagers' faces blur into warm shapes, their movements blending with the flicker of the fire. You feel a gentle pressure behind your eyes, as if the world is expanding just a little to make room for something new. The ground beneath you hums softly, and for a moment you are convinced it is breathing. The sensation is not frightening. It is simply unfamiliar, like discovering the soil has been trying to tell you jokes for years, and you are only now learning the language. The shaman's voice deepens, echoing strangely, as if 2 or 3 voices are speaking at once. The villagers' humming grows louder, surrounding you in a low, rhythmic vibration. The smoke moves in patterns that seem intentional, swirling into shapes that resemble animals, hills, and sometimes faces. You blink slowly, and they shift, fading into new forms. You feel as though the world is communicating in symbols written in air, and you are on the verge of understanding. Heat rises through your limbs, a calm, radiant warmth that settles into your chest. You close your eyes and see fields stretching endlessly, crops swaying in rhythms tied to moon and sun. You see hands planting, harvesting, celebrating. You see storms, droughts, and triumphs, all woven into a cycle that feels both fragile and eternal. The visions flicker like reflections in water, brief yet resonant. When the chant softens, the smoke thins. The world returns slowly, settling back into its familiar shape. The villagers begin to disperse, some smiling dreamily, others quietly contemplative. You stand, feeling a grounded clarity, as if the earth shared a secret with you in a language older than words. You walk back toward your hut, guided by the faint glow of embers and a new sense of belonging. The fields stretch beyond the village, waiting for morning, and you breathe in the night air with a calm awareness that your place in this land has just deepened. You travel with a caravan that knows the desert better than it knows its own stories. A group of wanderers who move across the dunes with the confidence of people who have learned that arguing with sand only leads to more sand. The sun looms above you, bright enough to bleach thoughts out of your skull, and each step sinks slightly, as if the earth wants to keep your footprints as souvenirs. The desert is a place where logic dries out before noon, where mirages shimmer on the horizon like half-finished paintings. You accept this. You even respect it. But what no one prepared you for are the flowers. They grow in patches near the rocky outcrops where a thin layer of soil clings to life. Small blooms in colors far too bold for such a harsh place. Their petals shine with a strange iridescence, catching the light in ways that make your eyes linger longer than they should. The elders call them whisper flowers, a name that manages to be both poetic and suspicious. When you ask why, they exchange glances in the same tone of silence adults use when children ask where thunder comes from. The first time you see someone harvest the flowers, it is during a rare moment of shade beneath a wind-carved cliff. A caravan elder kneels with practiced care, picking each bloom gently and placing them into a woven pouch. He works like someone handling something sacred or mildly explosive. When he stands, he tells you that tonight will be your first time hearing the sky. As darkness falls, the camp settles around a fire whose glow seems unusually bright against the vast emptiness stretching in every direction. The sky turns from gold to violet to a deep blue that feels infinite, each star sparkling with a clarity that makes you wonder how often the heavens look at themselves in the desert's natural mirror. The elder prepares a brew by crushing the flowers into a powder and mixing it with warm water drawn from a precious skin. The liquid glows faintly, a shimmer that moves like it is trying to slip out of the bowl. You watch, intrigued and wary, as it is passed to you. The first sip tastes floral but sharp, like a petal with ambitions. A warmth spreads through your throat, down your chest, settling into your stomach with a slow roll. You take another sip because the elder's eyes are on you, and ignoring him would probably lead to a long lecture about tradition, ancestors, and consequences. The warmth deepens, your limbs loosen, your thoughts feel lighter, as if someone gently dusted them. When you lean back to look at the stars, they shift. Not dramatically, not in any way that would startle you, but in a slow, graceful rearrangement, like dancers stepping into a new pattern. A hush settles over the camp. The wind drops to a murmur. The horizon glows faintly, not from the fading sun, but from something softer, more deliberate. You blink, intrigued, and the stars brighten, each one pulsing in quiet rhythm. Then you hear it, a soft hum that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. It vibrates in your bones, warming your ribs, your spine, your breath. You realize with a slow exhale that the hum is rising from above, drifting down like threads of sound woven into the night. You tilt your head, listening. The sound deepens, layered with faint tones that feel almost like voices. You sit very still. The sky is talking, not in words you understand, not in sentences or stories, but in a language of resonance. Each star pulses with a matching note, a soft, shimmering vibration that makes your skin tingle. The constellations swirl gently, forming shapes you have seen before on ancient carvings and skins. You recognize patterns your people have followed for generations, but now they feel alive. They feel aware. The stars move in slow waves, as if greeting you with gentle curiosity. The elders smile knowingly. They have experienced this many times, though they rarely describe it. You understand why now. It is not something that translates well into speech. It is a sensation that must be lived, felt, breathed. You close your eyes and let the hum guide your thoughts. Images rise behind your eyelids, of dunes shifting through centuries, of storms rolling across the land with thunder like distant drums, of caravans stretching in long lines through time. You feel connected to all of it, part of something wider than your own path. When the night grows late, the hum fades. The stars return to their usual still brilliance, distant and silent. The wind picks up again, brushing grains of sand across your ankles. You feel grounded, calm, and strangely comforted, as if the cosmos gently placed a hand on your shoulder and whispered that you are seen. You lie back on the warm sand, the flowers' effects beginning to soften into a pleasant haze. The elders stoke the fire. The caravan settles into rest, and the desert breathes deeply around you. The sky no longer sings, but you can still feel traces of its voice lingering in your chest. A soft echo that promises you will never look at the stars quite the same way again. You stand in a valley where mist coils like living silk, drifting between terraces of green that climb the mountainside in careful steps. The air is warm and fragrant, thick with the scent of blossoms and damp earth. You have traveled far to reach this secluded place, following faint trails and rumors whispered by traders who swear that hidden deep in these folds of land lives a master of alchemical arts, someone who can coax secrets out of plants the way poets coax meaning out of moonlight. Your purpose is simple and impossible at the same time, to seek a taste of immortality. The alchemist's dwelling is a wooden structure tucked beneath a massive pine whose branches spread like a protective cloak. You approach slowly, feeling the weight of centuries in the air. It is the kind of place where the world goes quiet to listen. A chime rings softly overhead as you pass beneath the eaves, its tone clear enough to vibrate through your ribs. The door slides open without a sound, revealing a man who looks older than the mountains, yet moves with the ease of someone who never bothered to age properly. Inside, bundles of dried herbs hang from the beams in orderly rows, each one tied with ribbons of different colors. Ceramic jars line the shelves, their surfaces painted with symbols you do not recognize, symbols that almost seem to shift when you glance away. A cauldron simmers near the back wall, releasing tendrils of steam that shimmer as if touched by starlight. The alchemist gestures for you to sit, his robes rustling like leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. His eyes hold a spark that suggests he finds mortals who desire immortality both endearing and slightly amusing. He begins by crushing leaves on a stone slab, moving his hand in slow circles. The leaves release a bright, sharp aroma that fills the room with a pleasant warmth. He murmurs something about balance, about the harmony between earth and spirit, and you nod even though you barely understand. He adds a pinch of powder that glows faintly, a powder he claims was gathered from flowers that bloom only once each century. You are not sure if he is exaggerating, but you decide that exaggeration is practically required in a place like this. The mixture goes into the cauldron. The steam intensifies, now swirling in patterns that seem deliberate. The alchemist stirs, each movement slow and graceful, as if he is guiding the vapor into shape. You watch the colors change from gold to rose to a deep blue that sparkles at the edges. The scent evolves too, shifting from sharp to floral to something that reminds you faintly of fresh rain on stone. You feel your heart slow, your breath deepen, as if your body recognizes the significance of the moment before your mind can catch up. When he pours the brew into a small porcelain cup, it glows softly, casting ripples of light across the table. You lift it carefully. The warmth kisses your palms, spreading through your fingers. The alchemist nods. You drink. The first taste is delicate, like a petal dissolving on your tongue. Then comes a wave of heat rolling down your throat, settling in your chest with a soft radiance. Your vision sharpens, colors brighten, The world seems to unfold a little wider than before. You exhale, and the air tastes sweeter, as though the valley itself has leaned closer to greet you. Your senses stretch. You feel the pulse of the earth beneath the floorboards, the slow heartbeat of soil and root. You hear the whisper of leaves outside, each one catching wind in its own voice. Light bends around the room in gentle spirals, and for a moment you see patterns woven through everything, lines of energy connecting herb to jar, steam to flame, alchemist to mountain. Time loosens its grip. You sense days flowing like water, centuries flickering like lanterns in a distant garden. You understand how people once mistook this feeling for immortality. It is not the promise of living forever. It is the experience of touching a world where endings feel softer, where life expands beyond the boundaries of your own existence. The warmth fades slowly, leaving clarity in its wake. You blink, and the room returns to its ordinary stillness. The alchemist watches with a knowing smile, though his eyes hold a trace of melancholy, as if he has seen too many people mistake a moment of illumination for a guarantee. You bow in gratitude, understanding now that immortality is not a single drink or secret herb. It is a fleeting glimpse of something larger, a reminder that life is richer than you realized. As you leave the valley, the mist parts for you. The mountains stand tall, ancient and unchanging, but the world feels different somehow, as if a door briefly opened where none existed before. And though the bruise magic has faded from your veins, you carry its lingering echo in the quiet spaces of your mind, like a small flame that will not easily dim. You follow a narrow path through a bamboo forest that hums with a quiet music of its own. Each stalk rises straight and tall, swaying just enough to whisper secrets to its neighbors. The air is cool and sweet, carrying a faint scent of leaves that have soaked in seasons of rain and sunlight. The forest feels alive in a deliberate way, as though every rustle and creak is part of a conversation you have arrived late to. Early healers chose this place not for convenience, but because the land itself seemed willing to help. You come seeking a tea known only in murmured stories, a brew said to open the spirit like a door and let the world step inside. The healers call it seeing through the veil. The villagers call it dangerous curiosity. The elders simply sigh when you ask, which is their way of saying they hope you know what you are doing. You do not, of course, but you have already walked too far to turn back now. The healer waits in a clearing where sunlight filters through the bamboo in warm strips. She sits beside a small fire, stirring a pot with a bamboo ladle. Around her are bundles of leaves tied with twine, each one selected with the care of someone arranging offerings. When she gestures for you to sit, her movements are slow and intentional, like she is guiding the air more than her own limbs. Her voice is soft when she speaks, but it carries easily, blending with the rustling leaves. She explains the tea in a way that sounds half instructional and half poetic. Certain leaves must be harvested before dawn, others only after they have soaked in moonlight. The final ingredient is a blossom that blooms only once each year, unfolding for a single night before retreating back into its bud. You listen, though most of the details slip past you like minnows in a stream. What you do understand is that this drink is not meant for comfort. It is meant for clarity, a clarity that comes at the cost of facing whatever sits quietly inside your chest. When she pours the tea, the liquid is a soft jade color, steaming gently in the cool air. The scent rises in delicate waves, floral with an undercurrent of something older, something like distant rain carried through time. You wrap your hands around the cup, feeling its warmth seep into your palms. The healer nods. You lift it to your lips and drink. The first taste is subtle, almost disappointingly mild, but as it settles on your tongue, the flavor deepens, unfurling like a scroll. Notes of earth, blossoms, and something faintly sweet blend together before fading into a quiet warmth that spreads slowly through your chest. Your breath deepens, your shoulders loosen. The bamboo forest begins to sway, not in the way wind moves it, but in a rhythm that feels intentional. You blink, and the shadows beneath the stalks shift like ink swirling in water. The healer begins a soft chant, her voice rising and falling like a bird's call carried on a breeze. The sound vibrates gently through the clearing, and you feel it inside you, Settling into the spaces the tea has opened, your vision blurs, then sharpens with an unfamiliar clarity. The colors around you brighten, the greens deepening into shades you never knew existed. Even the air seems to glow, each breath carrying a faint shimmer. You close your eyes, and the forest rushes in. You hear bamboo groaning softly as it grows, roots stretching through damp soil in slow determination. You hear insects whispering in patterns too complex to be random. You feel the heartbeat of the earth, steady and ancient, pulsing beneath your palms. For a moment, you are not separate from the forest. You are part of its rhythm, its breath, its memory. When you open your eyes again, the healer is watching you with that same patient expression, as though she sees everything you cannot articulate. The forest looks unchanged, yet you sense layers beneath its surface, hidden threads that connect leaf to root, root to soil, soil to sky. The world feels intricate and delicate, held together by intentions you can only guess at. The warmth of the tea softens, settling into a quiet awareness rather than a vivid vision. The healer offers you a second cup of plain water to steady yourself. Around you, the bamboo sways gently, as if pleased to have been understood, even briefly. You rise slowly, feeling lighter, yet more grounded, as though the forest placed something thoughtful in your hands without asking anything in return. As you follow the path out of the clearing, the air feels different, clearer in a way that makes the world seem newly formed. The tea's effects fade, but the sense of connection lingers, a subtle thread tying you back to the bamboo and the quiet wisdom it carries. You walk on, carrying that thread with you, knowing that the forest will always whisper if you choose to listen. You sit beside a low fire that crackles with the quiet confidence of something that has been warming travelers since the beginning of human confusion. Around you, the early world feels both bare and overflowing, a place where language is still learning how to shape itself, and people cling to stories the way they cling to warmth. A small clay pot rests in the coals, its lid trembling softly with each bubble rising inside. The smell drifting from it carries hints of wild leaves, crushed blossoms, and a bitter edge that warns you the drink was never meant for comfort. It was meant for revelation, or at least for helping someone pretend they had one. You came here because poets insist this brew opens a doorway in the mind, a thin crack where thoughts slip through unhindered by logic or daily chores. They claim it loosens the tongue, brightens the senses, and makes even the simplest idea swell into something that feels profound. The elders call it leaf fire for the way it flickers through the body, slow at first, then quick enough to surprise you. The few who have tasted it describe the world becoming so vivid that ordinary moments glow like warm coals in the dark. You have no idea if any of that is true. But you are not the first person to chase inspiration like it is a startled deer. Across from you sits the brewer, a woman wrapped in a faded wool cloak. She stirs the pot with the patience of someone who has watched countless people before you pretend they came for enlightenment rather than adventure. Her eyes flicker in the firelight, sharp and amused, like she already knows you will not be able to describe this experience without embellishing it later. She lifts the lid, letting steam billow upward. The fragrance is rich now, layered with a sweetness that clings to the back of your throat even before you drink. When she pours the liquid into a cup of carved wood, the brew glows faintly, as if hoarding the last fading rays of daylight. You take the cup, warming your hands against its sides. The first sip shocks you with how gentle it is. The taste begins mild, almost grassy, then deepens into something floral and slightly smoky. It slides down your throat with the slow confidence of a thought that knows it has somewhere to go. A soft heat blooms behind your eyes. You blink and the world shifts, not dramatically, but like it has exhaled. The fire looks brighter. The shadows look softer. Even the ground beneath you feels less like soil and more like a woven fabric holding you carefully in place. The brewer says nothing. She only watches as your gaze drifts toward the sky, where stars pulse with patient certainty. You begin to notice patterns you never saw before, clusters that seem to lean toward each other as though engaged in quiet conversation. A rhythm settles into your body, something steady and subtle, like a poem already forming in the back of your mind. The words are not clear, but the intention is. You understand suddenly why people traveled long distances for this brew, why they sat in circles composing verses about wind, love, and the unfairness of life when you run out of clean clothes during the rainy season. Your thoughts loosen, drifting through images that feel stitched from memories and imagination. The sound of the fire becomes a steady heartbeat. The trees surrounding the clearing sway as if keeping rhythm with an invisible drum. Even the night air seems filled with clues. Hints of meaning scattered everywhere you look. You lift your face to the breeze and feel a strange certainty that the world is nudging you towards something you are supposed to see. The brewer finally speaks, her voice low and calm. She tells you not to chase the visions. Let them come, she says, like birds landing where they choose. You follow her advice, relaxing into the sensation. Your mind moves easily now, unfurling ideas the way leaves unfurl in early morning sunlight. Thoughts merge and separate. You begin forming lines in your head that feel like they belong in an ancient ode sung to a half-attentive crowd of hunters pretending they appreciate metaphors. The warmth inside you shifts again, settling into a quiet clarity. You look at your hands, the fire, the sky, and everything seems threaded together by the same unseen loom. For a moment, you understand the poets who swear the world speaks in riddles, and the brewers who claim the leaves simply help you hear them more clearly. The night is still, but it feels alive with possibility, humming softly beneath your thoughts. As the brew's intensity ebbs, you return gently to yourself. The stars lose their conversation but keep their beauty. The fire settles into a slow dance of embers. The brewer takes your empty cup with a nod, as though she has seen this transformation countless times and finds it reassuring. You rise, steady on your feet, your mind quieter but more expansive than before. The path leading back to the village glows faintly under the moonlight, as if inviting you to carry your newfound ideas into the waiting world. You follow the wandering mystic long before you see him, guided mostly by the faint aroma drifting on the wind. It smells like crushed herbs mixed with something metallic, the kind of scent that makes your instincts argue quietly among themselves. The man moves ahead of you with the slow confidence of someone who has no schedule and no intention of ever developing one. His robe is frayed at the edges, his sandals are older than some villages, and his hair carries the unbothered wildness of a person who believes regular bathing is optional for spiritual enlightenment. You do not know his name, and you suspect he has forgotten it himself. But people speak of him in hushed tones, saying he grinds strange powders that let mortals glimpse beyond the ordinary world. You walk until the land opens into a small hollow carved between two rocky hills. The mystic kneels beside a flat stone worn smooth through decades of use. Laid before him is a pouch made of cured hide and decorated with symbols you cannot decipher. He unties it with a reverence that makes you straighten your back, as though you are about to witness a sacred ceremony instead of whatever dangerous experiment this might actually be. The contents spill out, forming tiny piles of roots, bark, berries, and things that once belonged to plants but now resemble secrets waiting to be whispered. He takes a slender bone pestle and begins to grind the ingredients with slow, rhythmic strokes. The powder forms gradually, shifting from earthy browns to strange shades of violet and pale gold. Each swirl of dust seems to shimmer with a life of its own. The mystic hums while he works, a low tune that trembles through your chest and blends with the soft scratch of stone on stone. You crouch nearby, trying to look calm, even though your mind is absolutely certain that consuming mystery powder from a nomadic stranger is not the sort of life choice that leads to peaceful old age. When he finishes grinding, he lifts a pinch of the powder and lets it fall through his fingers. It disperses into the air like an offering to the breeze, sparkling faintly as it drifts away. He motions for you to come closer. You do, partly because you are curious, and partly because it is difficult to refuse someone whose eyebrows alone seem to know ancient wisdom. He hands you a small clay cup and pours a portion of the powder inside. Then he adds a trickle of water from a gourd, just enough to turn it into a thick paste the color of a bruised sunrise. You lift the cup to your face and inhale. The scent is sharp, peppery, and oddly floral, like a meadow that decided to pursue a career in sorcery. The mystic gestures for you to drink, so you do. Because at this point your choices are to trust him or walk away and spend the rest of your life wondering why your courage evaporated at the last moment. The paste touches your tongue with a bitterness that fades quickly into sweetness. It slides down your throat with a warmth that spreads through your body like the first stretch after waking. The world shifts gently, as though someone has nudged reality sideways. Colors deepen. The sky takes on a soft glow. The rocks around you hum with resonance you feel rather than hear. You blink, and the ground beneath your feet ripples like fabric. The mystic sits across from you, smiling as though he has seen this reaction many times. His expression is serene, amused, and slightly smug. Thoughts begin to move differently in your mind. They roll together like streams merging into a river, forming connections you never would have considered. You understand, suddenly, why mystics wander instead of settling down. The world feels full of hints and whispers, too many to fit into one village. Your senses sharpen. You feel the wind brushing against your skin, not as a simple breeze, but as a companion urging you to listen. Even the distant cry of a hawk carries meaning, as if the bird is delivering commentary on your life choices. Then comes the clarity, subtle but undeniable. Images flicker behind your eyelids when you blink. A path through the hills, a circle of stones, a hand extended in greeting. They do not feel like visions or warnings. They feel like memories you have not lived yet. You breathe slowly, grounding yourself as the mystic instructed earlier. The sensations swell and ease like waves coming to shore, never overwhelming, always inviting exploration. When the powder's effects begin to fade, the world settles back into its familiar shape. The hills look like hills again. The rocks stop humming, and your thoughts regain their usual boundaries. But something lingers, a quiet certainty that a door opened, even if only for a moment. The mystic gathers his tools with practiced ease, slipping the bone, pestle, and hide pouch into his robe. He nods once, a gesture of approval, or perhaps farewell. You rise, feeling steadier than expected. The hollow around you seems unchanged, yet you sense echoes of the experience lingering in the air like distant bells. You look at the mystic, ready to ask what exactly you drank, or whether it was safe, but he is already walking away with the same unhurried steps that led you here. You follow the path out of the hollow, carrying with you the memory of shimmering dust and a mind that, for a brief moment, wandered beyond its borders. You travel with the horse lords long enough to understand that their lives are measured by hooves, wind, and the constant thrum of open horizons. Days stretch into a blur of grass and sky, and nights settle like heavy blankets, scented with smoke and sweat. You ride until your legs ache, then ride a little more because no one around you seems to believe walking is a respectable activity. Their horses carry them as if born from the same dust, swift and proud, and every rider moves with the assurance of someone who has never lost an argument with nature. Tonight, though, the camp feels different. The air trembles with anticipation. Warriors lead their mounts toward a wide circle of stones, while elders arrange bundles of sticky resin on flat pieces of bark. The resins glisten in the firelight, thick and amber-colored, and they cling to the fingers of anyone brave enough to touch them. You kneel beside one of the bowls, watching as the substance softens and releases a scent that hits you with a mix of sweetness and something sharp enough to make your eyes water. It smells like the steppe itself has been distilled into a single moment. The oldest of the riders, a man with braids streaked white from sun and storms, gestures for you to join the half-circle around the fire. He moves with the steady determination of someone who has spent a lifetime chasing visions across endless plains. His voice carries low over the wind as he explains that these resins are gathered from shrubs that grow only on the far edges of the world, where the soil is thin and even the sky feels stretched tight. The horse lords believe the plants soak up the wandering spirits of travelers who died before reaching their destination. When the resins burn, those spirits return in flickers of flame and smoke to offer guidance. You are not entirely convinced, but no one here seems bothered by disbelief. They prepare for the ritual the same way they prepare for a hunt, with focus sharpened by familiarity rather than fear. One by one, the young riders step forward, tossing bits of resin into the flames. The fire snaps and curls upward, sending out tendrils of smoke that twist in patterns shaped by the wind. The scent deepens into something intoxicating, a rich aroma that wraps around your thoughts like a warm hand. When your turn comes, you drop your piece of resin into the fire. It melts instantly, releasing a swirl of smoke that rises straight toward you. You inhale without meaning to, and the sensation hits with a surprising weight. The world shifts in subtle ways. The flames seem taller, the air feels lighter. Your heartbeat hums in your ears like distant hoofbeats. You blink, but the camp does not settle. Instead, the edges of everything soften, as though the night has grown curious and leaned in too close. The riders begin to chant, their voices layered in rhythms that vibrate through your bones. The fire answers, sending sparks spiraling skyward in graceful arcs. You watch the flames, certain you see shapes forming inside them. At first they look like tricks of heat and shadow, but gradually they sharpen into silhouettes. Horses, wild and powerful, run through the heart of the fire, their manes glowing like molten gold. Their hooves strike sparks that scatter into the night air. You can almost hear them breathing. The riders sway gently, eyes half closed, as though they too are watching a world layered over this one. Someone to your left whispers that the visions always come in movement, never in stillness. The spirits of the steppe are restless. They communicate through motion, like wind across grass or a horse galloping towards something only it understands. You breathe deeply, letting the smoke settle behind your eyes. Patterns flicker there, shifting landscapes filled with unfamiliar mountains and winding paths. You feel a tug in your chest, an invitation to follow. The old rider places a hand on your shoulder. His grip is steady, grounding you as the visions surge and fade like waves pushing against a shoreline. He tells you not to cling to any single image. The resins do not reveal destinies. They reveal possibilities. The future is as changeable as the wind, and the horse lords trust instinct more than prophecy. The smoke simply reminds them how wide the world truly is. Gradually the fire settles, its flames shrinking back into ordinary shapes. The smoke thins, the chants fade, and the riders slowly return to themselves. You feel the night air shift, cool and grounding, brushing your skin like a reminder of where you are. Your heartbeat steadies. The visions dissolve into memory, leaving behind a strange exhilaration, the sense of having glimpsed something not meant for casual eyes. The horse lords begin tending their mounts again, moving with a calm that suggests this ritual is less about spectacle and more about recalibration, a way to realign the spirit with the open land they depend on. You stand, legs slightly unsteady, and glance toward the horizon where the moonlight spills across the plains. The world looks the same as it did earlier, yet something in it feels expanded, as though invisible paths now weave through the darkness, waiting for someone bold enough to follow them. You inhale the last traces of smoke, letting the night settle around you. The horses stamp the ground softly, listening to the wind, and you feel for the first time that you understand a fraction of what drives the riders onward. The steppe is wide, the sky endless, and somewhere in that stretched silence, the visions continue to gallop just beyond reach. You follow the river long enough to realize it behaves less like water and more like a wandering storyteller that cannot resist collecting rumors. Every bend carries a new current of voices. Every ripple seems to whisper about someone upstream doing something questionable with roots, jars, or both. By the time you reach the trading camp, you already know what you came for will not be simple. Nothing is ever simple when fermentation is involved. Humans take a perfectly innocent plant, bury it, wait until it starts bubbling with ominous enthusiasm, then decide drinking it is a wise cultural tradition. The camp sprawls along the riverbank like a temporary village built from woven mats, reed baskets, and half-completed negotiations. Traders move among the stalls with the calm chaos of people who have done this their entire lives. Their boats sit pulled up on the mud, rocking gently with the tide, filled with bundles wrapped tightly in cloth. Every trader you meet carries a faint smell of earth on their hands, a reminder that the river kingdoms owe their prosperity not to gold or conquest, but to roots pulled from deep soil and transformed into something stronger than any crown. You are led toward a shaded canopy where a cluster of elders sit around clay jars sealed with wax. They look up when you approach, their expressions unreadable, except for the faint smile that suggests they already know you are not prepared for whatever they are about to offer. One of them taps a jar with a carved stick, and the jar answers with a hollow, bubbling sound. The others nod approvingly, as if the roots inside have passed some important exam. The elder closest to you explains that these roots grow only in narrow patches of soil where the river occasionally floods, leaving behind silt rich enough to raise plants that seem slightly too spirited for their own good. Harvesting them requires patience, timing, and a willingness to get stuck in mud so deep it could swallow your sandals. Once gathered, the roots are chopped, buried in clay pits, covered with leaves, and left to ferment under the heat of the sun. Weeks later, they are dug up, washed, and sealed in jars with river water. The mixture continues to ferment, developing a strength that is less drink and more experience. You try not to let the nervous flutter in your stomach show, but one of the elders notices anyway. He chuckles softly and tells you that everyone reacts that way at first. Even the warrior chiefs who pretend they fear nothing start to look thoughtful the moment a jar is opened. He gestures for you to sit. The jar is unsealed with surprising delicacy, as if it might decide to attack if handled too aggressively. A scent rises immediately, warm and earthy with a sharp edge that pricks the inside of your nose. It smells like a forest floor that has learned to defend itself. The liquid poured into your cup is cloudy, swirling with faint traces of sediment. When you raise it to your lips, you hesitate, and the elders watch with the patient attention of people who love drama but would never admit it. You drink. The taste is wild. It begins sour, then deepens into something almost sweet, then shifts again into a flavor you cannot place. It spreads warmth through your chest, slow at first, then quicker, as if a small fire has been lit behind your ribs. The river seems to change color. The light glitters on its surface, dancing in patterns that move too smoothly to be ordinary. You feel the ground steady beneath you, but your senses begin to drift in gentle circles, following currents that tug at your mind like quiet tides. The elders continue talking, their voices blending with the water, creating rhythms that echo inside you. Stories spill from them, tales about kingdoms built along the riverbanks, alliances sealed with jars of fermented roots, and feasts where songs lasted until sunrise. Your thoughts begin to float. Images from their stories unfurl in your mind with surprising clarity. You see boats carved with symbols drifting side by side, their captains laughing over a shared drink. You see warriors painting their faces before battle, swallowing a mouthful of the brew to sharpen their courage. You see healers tending the injured, offering the roots warmth, not as remedy but as comfort. Every image pulses with life, connected by unseen threads. When the drink's intensity peaks, the river seems to lift slightly, as if it is leaning forward to listen. The sky softens, turning shades of violet and pale gold. You cannot tell if time slows or if you simply stop caring about its pace. The elders begin a rhythmic chant, tapping the jars with their carved sticks, and the sound resonates through your chest. For a moment, you understand why this brew travels farther than any caravan and inspires loyalty deeper than any treaty. Gradually, the warmth fades, returning your senses to their familiar edges. You blink, the river settles, and the elders nod with quiet approval. They seal the jars again, murmuring blessings for safe passage. You rise, feeling the lingering comfort of the brew still resting in your limbs. As you step away from the canopy, the river breeze brushes your face, carrying the faint scent of fermented roots and distant stories waiting downstream. You descend into the cave with a torch that crackles like it is just as nervous as you are. The entrance closes behind you in a slow curve of stone, swallowing the last traces of daylight. Down here, the air feels still, dense with a quiet that settles over your shoulders like a heavy shawl. Your footsteps echo along the tunnel walls, and every sound seems magnified, as though the cave is listening with far too much interest. The elders said the fungi only grow in places the earth has chosen, places where stone remembers the world before people bothered to name it. The tunnel widens into a chamber lit by an otherworldly glow. You stop, blinking, because nothing prepares you for seeing light growing directly out of the ground. The fungi cling to the walls, thick clusters of pale stalks topped with caps that shimmer like frost catching moonlight. Their glow pulses faintly, each breath of light slow and rhythmic, as though hundreds of tiny hearts are beating inside them. A cool, earthy scent fills the chamber, mingled with something sweet and metallic. The combination makes your skin prickle. A prophet once lived in these caves, or so the stories claim. He wandered deep into the earth to seek answers from the stone, returning days later with visions that shaped kings and toppled them. You suspect he spent most of his time sitting in this very chamber, trying not to admit he was lost, and accidentally inhaling things he was not supposed to. But legends grow stranger with each retelling, and the fungi have always been part of the tale. The elders believe they hold truth, wisdom, and perhaps a touch of mischief. You kneel beside a cluster of the largest caps. Their glow brightens as you approach, as if acknowledging you. You reach out and gently break off a single piece, watching the way it releases a soft puff of luminous dust. The particles drift toward you, swirling lightly before settling in the air like fireflies that forgot how to blink. You hesitate only a moment before placing the fragment on your tongue. It dissolves faster than expected, leaving a faint tingling that spreads across your mouth and down your throat. The taste is earthy and cool, followed by a sweetness that lingers behind your teeth. The chamber shifts, not in the way falling rocks shift, but in a subtler, stranger way. The glow of the fungi intensifies, rising and falling in an unfamiliar rhythm. The stone under your palms feels warmer, almost alive. You blink and the shadows ripple, stretching and contracting like breathing creatures. The walls seem deeper, the air feels thicker. You inhale again, and the world tilts gently. Not enough to frighten you, but enough for your senses to stretch outward. Then come the shapes. At first they are faint, suggestions carved into the glow. Figures appear along the walls, outlined in shimmering light. They move with deliberate slowness, their gestures graceful and precise. You watch silently as a pair of them trace spirals in the air, their hands leaving trails of luminescent dust that drift downward like soft snowfall. Their bodies are not quite human, though they resemble you enough to stir something in your memory, as if you once dreamed of them long ago. Their movements shift, and suddenly the chamber is filled with scenes. A storm rolling over a valley, a tiger outlined in starlight, a river splitting its banks, a circle of faces gathered around a fire. None of it feels like prophecy, exactly. More like a tapestry of possibilities, woven from whispers and echoes. The visions come not as commands but as invitations, asking you to witness rather than interpret. The cave hums softly, a low vibration that settles into your bones. You feel the pulse of the earth, slow and ancient, guiding you through the images. Heat rises in your chest, not uncomfortable, just present. The luminous dust drifts around you, catching in your hair, brushing your skin like gentle fingertips. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sensations roll through you. Behind your eyelids, the glow threads itself into new shapes, weaving ideas you cannot yet put into words. When you open your eyes, the visions begin to fade. The figures dissolve into soft light. The chamber dims slowly, leaving only the natural glow of the fungi. Your heartbeat steadies. The warmth settles, and the air grows still again. You exhale, feeling the weight of the experience settle into your thoughts like a stone dropped into deep water. You rise, brushing luminous dust from your hands. The cave feels quieter now, as though it has shared something it cannot repeat. You take one last look at the glowing clusters before turning toward the tunnel. As you walk back into the darkness, the faint pulse of the fungi follows you, a gentle reminder of what you witnessed deep beneath the earth. When you finally emerge into the night air, the world feels sharper, wider, and slightly unreal, as though reality itself is still adjusting to let you back in. You breathe deeply, carrying the last traces of the cave's glow inside you, a quiet ember of something vast and ancient that will not easily fade. You first hear about the berries from a warrior who speaks in the same tone a person uses to warn you about stepping on a sleeping snake. He tells you the bushes grow at the edge of the forest where the soil turns dark and the wind always sounds like it is deciding whether or not to curse you. No one harvests them willingly anymore, not after what happened to the warriors who once believed the berries were a shortcut to courage. But stories have a way of dragging you along even after you promise yourself you will be sensible, and soon you find your feet following the same path those warriors walked long before sense returned to them. The forest greets you with a hush. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels earned through centuries of watching people make poor decisions beneath its branches. The deeper you walk, the dimmer the light becomes, filtered through tangled leaves that shift in restless patterns. The air carries a tangy sweetness, faint but unmistakable, as though something ripe is waiting just out of sight. When you finally reach the clearing, the berry bushes sit, squat and unimpressive, their branches thin and tangled like they are trying to hide from you. The berries themselves, though, gleam with an unnatural sheen, small orbs of deep red that seem to pulse with an almost spiteful glow. You crouch beside one bush, recalling the tales. Long ago, young warriors plucked these berries in handfuls, convinced they would sharpen their senses during battle. They swallowed them before charging into combat, chasing the promise of strength and fearlessness. The berries delivered something, certainly, but not what they expected. They brought visions instead. Wild ones, bending the world into shapes that made friend and foe indistinguishable. Some warriors attacked shadows, some charged at trees. One claimed the sky tried to wrestle him. The elders banned the berries after that, burying the bushes in warnings and superstition. You reach out to pick just one, expecting the plant to recoil or hiss at you, given its reputation. Instead, it trembles slightly, releasing a faint scent that prickles your nose. You place the berry on your tongue, half expecting it to taste like doom. It tastes surprisingly pleasant, sweet with a hint of bitterness that settles behind your teeth. A warmth begins spreading from your chest, slow at first, then quicker, curling through your limbs like smoke seeking a way out. The clearing shifts. The colors turn richer, as if the forest dipped itself in fresh paint. Every leaf seems outlined in light. Every blade of grass hums with quiet purpose. You blink, but the world only grows more vivid. The berries clearly waste no time. The trees sway with exaggerated grace, their branches rippling in waves as though greeting you with theatrical enthusiasm. The wind brushes your skin in warm spirals, almost playful. You exhale, and the air shimmers faintly in front of you. Then comes the sound, low and distant at first, like drums played underwater. It grows louder, vibrating through the ground. You place a hand on the soil, feeling the pulse of it, steady and rhythmic. Images flicker at the edges of your vision, warriors moving in tight formation, spears raised, eyes determined. But the images waver, doubling and shifting, as though caught between truth and memory. You watch them break stride, turning toward shapes you cannot see. Their expressions twist with confusion, then fear, then wild exhilaration. The clearing feels full of echoes, remnants of choices made long ago by people who trusted what should not be trusted. Your heartbeat quickens. The warmth spreads behind your eyes. The clearing grows brighter still, almost too bright. The berry's sweetness turns sharp, settling into your thoughts with a buzzing intensity. You understand, suddenly, how the early warriors mistook this for clarity. The sensation is bold, intoxicating, as if the world is presenting itself with complete honesty for the first time. But the honesty is too raw, too enormous. The forest does not shrink to fit your senses. Your senses stretch to fit the forest, and for a moment everything feels enormous enough to swallow you. You steady your breath. You focus on the ground beneath you, the steady rhythm of your inhales, the hum of the trees returning to their normal cadence. Slowly the intensity loosens, the light softens, the echoes fade, the forest settles back into its familiar shapes, watching you without judgment. The berry's effects ebb, leaving only a faint warmth and the memory of a world too large to hold at once. You stand carefully, brushing leaves from your knees. The bushes remain where they always were, quiet and unimpressive, their berries gleaming with innocent menace. You understand now why the elders forbade them, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. The berries do not empower, they overwhelm, offering visions too fierce for a mind preparing for battle. You step away from the clearing, feeling the last of the strange sweetness linger in your mouth. As you follow the path back toward sunlight, the forest exhales behind you, relieved or amused. You cannot tell which. You walk on, carrying the story of the cursed berries inside you, a tale shaped not by superstition, but by the quiet, humbling reminder that not all strength is meant to be borrowed. You climb the worn stone steps of the temple, each one smooth from countless feet that came seeking wisdom, reassurance, or at the very least, an interesting answer. The Mediterranean sun beats down on your shoulders, warm enough to convince you this entire place was built slightly too close to the sky. The air smells of dust, olive smoke, and something sharper drifting out from the inner chambers. You tell yourself that the seer's reputation for inhaling questionable vapors is exaggerated. You also remind yourself that reputations rarely form out of nothing. Inside, the light dims. The stone walls gleam with old carvings that twist and coil like ancient thoughts etched into the architecture. You move slowly, guided by torches that flicker with a golden shimmer. The heat inside is different from the heat outside. This heat wraps around you, heavy and fragrant, filled with herbs and resins burning in bronze bowls placed strategically where the air currents gather. It smells faintly sweet at first, then oddly metallic, then unmistakably strange, like a warning disguised as incense. A priest leads you deeper, his expression practiced into neutrality. He does not speak, merely motions for you to enter a chamber carved into the rock. The ceiling dips low, as if the weight of time is pressing down from above. At the center sits the seer, wrapped in flowing linen, her hair braided with strands of gold. She is older than you expected, though her gaze is sharp, cutting through the dim light with unsettling clarity. A plume of vapor curls upward from a fissure in the stone beside her, rising in lazy spirals that shimmer in the torchlight. She gestures for you to sit. You lower yourself onto a cushion, trying not to inhale too deeply, which of course guarantees that you do. The vapor slips into your lungs with a cool sting, followed immediately by a warmth that spreads through your chest like a tide coming in too fast. You shift, blinking hard as the air thickens. The seer closes her eyes, breathing slowly, the vapor curling around her lips like a familiar companion. The chamber begins to sway, not dramatically, but with a slow rhythm that makes it feel as though the stone itself is breathing. The torchlight elongates, stretching across the floor in ripples of gold. You blink again, but the effect deepens. The carvings on the wall seem to shift, their lines twisting into patterns that look halfway between symbols and serpents. You feel the air vibrate. A faint hum you cannot tell is internal or external. The seer begins to speak, her voice low and melodic, each word floating like it was carved from mist. She does not ask your questions. She tells you what you came for. She speaks of paths bending like reeds in the wind, of choices waiting beyond familiar horizons, of storms that test the roots of everything you think you understand. Her words wrap around you, impossible to ignore, half riddle and half memory. You wonder if you are hearing prophecy or simply your own fears reflected back at you through the haze. The vapor thickens. Your heartbeat slows, thudding in long, deliberate intervals. The edges of the chamber soften until you cannot tell where stone ends and shadow begins. You look toward the fissure. The steam rising from it seems brighter now, shimmering like moonlit water, twisting into shapes that dissolve before you can identify them. You inhale again accidentally, of course, and the warmth spreads behind your eyes. The seer's voice deepens, echoing faintly, as if another voice speaks just slightly behind hers. You do not feel lost. You feel unmoored, floating between thought and sensation, between the seer's words and your own interpretations. For a moment, the chamber fades entirely. You see coastlines stretching into blue horizons, ships rocking gently in harbors, columns rising toward a sky filled with sun and salt. Faces flicker past, unfamiliar yet strangely resonant. You reach toward them, but the visions slip through your fingers like water. The seer's hand touches your shoulder, grounding you as the world settles. The chamber returns in pieces. Torchlight, stone, the faint glimmer of resin burning in the bowl. Your breath comes easier. The warmth ebbs. The carvings return to stillness. She watches you with an expression that is neither triumphant nor pitying, only calm, as though this exchange is as ordinary to her as drawing water from a well. You stand slowly, legs steadying beneath you. The priest escorts you out without a word. When sunlight hits your face again, it feels brighter than it should, crisp and cool against your skin. The temple behind you hums with ancient quiet, its secrets tucked deep within stone and vapor. As you walk back down the steps, the world feels familiar again, yet slightly expanded, as though the seer peeled back a corner of reality just long enough for you to glimpse something beyond it, something you are not sure you believe, but will not easily forget. You step through the tall stone archway just as the last of the chanting fades. The temple is cool inside, far cooler than the courtyard you crossed, and the sudden shift makes your skin prickle. You breathe in slowly and immediately understand why the priests here claim they hear the heavens clearing their throats. The air is thick with incense, so fragrant it feels alive, swirling through the hall in shimmering layers, each carrying a different scent. Sweet blossoms, a hint of citrus, something smoky and ancient, something else you cannot name at all, though your brain insists it once belonged to a star. The priests do not acknowledge you at first. They move through the haze like practiced swimmers, their robes trailing behind them in long white folds, their eyes half-lidded. One of them holds a bronze censer shaped like a lion, its mouth releasing thin ribbons of pale smoke that curl upward in lazy spirals. Another hums under his breath, the tune soft and oddly beautiful, as if trying to match a melody only he can hear. You follow quietly, trying not to draw attention to how much the incense is already making your knees feel surprisingly negotiable. At the front of the hall stands an altar carved from a single block of stone. Above it hangs a mosaic of the night sky, tiny shards of blue, gold, silver, and pearl, arranged into constellations that seem to shimmer as the torchlight flickers over them. A priest motions for you to kneel, and you do, though it takes you longer than expected to locate the floor. The incense has begun to warm your chest, blooming outward like heat from a banked fire. You blink at the mosaic and swear the stars there have shifted slightly, as though adjusting themselves for a better view. The high priest approaches, carrying a small wooden box wrapped in cloth. He sets it on the altar and unwraps it with careful fingers. Inside are bundles of dried herbs tied with colored thread, each bundle containing leaves, petals, and thin twisted roots. He explains in a low voice that these herbs were gathered from mountains that touch the clouds and valleys where moonlight pools like water. Some are common, he admits, but others grow in places so remote that only goats and the most determined priests ever reach them. The incense blend is a recipe older than memory, created to bridge the gap between mortal ears and celestial music. He drops the first bundle into a clay bowl over a small coal. The smoke rises immediately, soft and golden. The second bundle follows, and its smoke glimmers pale blue. The last bundle releases a deep violet plume that coils through the others, binding them together in a shimmering braid. When you inhale, the scents mingle in your lungs with surprising gentleness, soothing and unsettling all at once. You feel your heartbeat slow. The world grows very quiet. Then you hear it, not clearly at first. Faint notes drift through the air, barely louder than a whisper. They rise and fall in an elegant pattern that does not belong to flutes or strings or any instrument you know. The sound is too precise, too layered, too impossibly harmonious. You cannot even tell if it comes from above or behind or inside your own ribcage. You glance at the priests, expecting to see surprise, but they remain calm, eyes half closed as if listening to something familiar. The music swells. It wraps around you, filling the hall in waves. You see the mosaic above the altar begin to glow, the small tiles radiating soft light. The constellations pulse gently, their patterns shifting in time with the notes. The air vibrates with sound you can feel more than hear. For a moment you wonder if you are losing your balance, but your body remains steady while your senses float. The melody builds into something layered and immense, so intricate that trying to follow it feels like trying to track individual drops in a waterfall. It is beautiful, overwhelming, and slightly ridiculous, like discovering the heavens hold nightly choir practice and have decided tonight is their dress rehearsal. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you, your breath sinking with the rhythm. Gradually the music softens, then fades, leaving the hall warm and quiet. The incense never stopped burning, but its effects settle into a gentle hum. The mosaic dims back to its ordinary glow. The priests rise without urgency, their faces serene, as though this entire experience is as normal as morning prayers. You stand slowly, feeling the lingering warmth in your chest. The hall looks the same as when you entered, Yet everything feels subtly changed, as if some invisible curtain shifted just slightly to show you what lies behind. As you step toward the doorway, the incense trails after you in a faint ribbon, carrying with it the unforgettable memory of heavenly voices, rehearsing just for a moment within reach of human ears. You slip through a narrow passageway carved into sandstone, following a healer whose sandals whisper across the polished floor. The chamber ahead glows with lamplight, the flames steady despite the stillness of the air. The heat settles on your skin like a second layer, warm enough to make each breath feel deliberate. You have heard stories of this place, a sanctuary hidden beneath the palace where healers work in silence and shadows, using tools and concoctions whispered about but never acknowledged in public. Most of those whispers involve oils that arrived in clay jars with no markings, carried by traders who insisted they came from lands where the sand sings at night. The healer pushes aside a heavy linen curtain, revealing a room filled with clay vessels arranged on shelves cut directly into the stone. Each jar is sealed with wax stamped in unusual symbols, the kind you suspect were created by someone who wanted to sound official while staying anonymous. The air is dense, with scents that twist together in confusing harmony: resin, myrrh, lotus, and beneath them, faint traces of something sharper, something that prickles your nose and hints at secrets buried deeper than the tombs outside the city walls. You sit on a low stool while the healer kneels beside a jar wrapped in palm fibers. He handles it carefully, as though the clay might wake up and protest. He mutters that this particular oil was smuggled in through the delta marshes, hidden among jars of perfume and spices meant for noble women. The traders insisted it was too potent to be used lightly, too unpredictable for those who did not understand the ways of the body and the spirit. He tells you this with the tone of someone who absolutely intends to use it anyway. He breaks the wax seal, and the scent that escapes is unlike anything you have ever smelled. It is sweet at first, almost soothing, but beneath the sweetness lies a sharpness that slides through your senses, like heat rising from stone at midday. The healer dips his fingers into the oil and massages it between his palms until it warms. You watch the shine spread across his skin as he works, his expression calm yet faintly amused, as if you are about to understand why these oils were smuggled in secret rather than carried openly in temple processions. He asks you to close your eyes. You do, and he presses his hands gently against your temples. The warmth of the oil spreads instantly, seeping through your skin and blooming outward in a slow, radiant wave. You inhale deeply without meaning to, and the scent rushes through your lungs, filling your chest with a strange lightness. The chamber seems to tilt, though your body remains perfectly still. You feel the stone beneath your feet, as though it is pulsing, alive with ancient memory. The healer speaks softly, guiding your breath with practiced calm. His voice feels distant and close at once. The warmth of the oil settles behind your eyes, and when you open them, the lamplight has changed. The flames flicker in colors that should not exist in fire. Gold deepens into something richer. Red brightens into something almost metallic. The shadows on the walls move with a rhythm that does not match the movement of the lamps, weaving together like dancers performing a silent ritual. You blink, but the visions only layer deeper. Faint lines of light appear in the air, trailing from the healer's hands as he moves them just above your skin. You feel the whisper of heat without contact. The lines shift into shapes, then symbols, then something that resembles the flowing script carved on temple walls. You cannot read it, yet it feels familiar, like a memory waiting to surface. The scent thickens. Your senses expand outward, as though your awareness has been stretched. You hear the drip of water far down the corridor, the rustle of linen somewhere behind the curtain, the soft hum of the healer's breath. Every sound threads together into a quiet melody. You exhale slowly, grounding yourself as the heat coils through your chest, wrapping your pulse in something steady and ancient. Gradually the visions soften, the shimmering lines fade, the flames return to their usual colors. Your breath steadies. You lift your gaze to the healer, and he gives a small nod, satisfied. He wipes the remaining oil from his hands with a linen cloth, careful not to spill a drop. You understand now why these oils were carried in secret and why only certain chambers were trusted to hold them. You rise from the stool, still feeling the warmth settling into your bones. The room looks the same as before, yet the air carries a subtle hum, as if the walls remember what you saw, even if you cannot fully articulate it. As you step back through the curtain, the scent lingers on your skin, trailing behind you like a whisper of something older than the kingdom above your head. You arrive at the palace long after the sun has vanished behind the hills, yet the astrologer's courtyard is alive with movement. Lamps glow along the marble walkways, their flames flickering in soft breezes that carry the scent of jasmine and something far more suspicious. You follow a servant who walks briskly despite the late hour, leading you past rooms where scribes still scratch ink onto papyrus and guards stifle yawns that threaten to break their stoic composure. Everyone here seems exhausted, but no one dares sleep. The stars are unpredictable this month, or so the astrologers claim, and sleep is treated like an enemy that cannot be allowed through the palace gates. At the far end of the courtyard stands the astrologer's tower, its upper balcony crammed with men in elegant robes pointing bronze instruments at the sky while muttering calculations that sound more like arguments. Below them, nestled among cushions and scrolls, sits the reason you came, a low table covered in ornate jugs, each one carved with symbols so intricate they look like they were designed by someone who had not slept properly in years. The royal brews, the liquid dedication that keeps the court's stargazers awake long enough to interpret omens no sane person should contemplate at 3 a.m. A young astrologer motions for you to sit, then pours a cup of the brew with trembling hands. He looks like he has drifted far beyond the point where thoughts remain predictable. His hair sticks up in random directions, as though it gave up following instructions days ago. His eyes glimmer with an intensity that suggests he has seen too many constellations shifting into shapes that should not exist. When he speaks, his voice carries the desperate enthusiasm of someone who truly believes sleep is overrated. The brew steams in your cup, its scent rich and sharp. You inhale, unsure whether you are smelling roasted herbs or pure ambition. There is a sweetness to it, faint but enticing, layered under something smoky and bitter. The astrologer warns you to sip slowly. You nod, though you are fairly certain he no longer remembers what slowly means. You lift the cup and drink. The taste hits immediately, bold and complex. It begins smooth, almost soothing, then flares into something bright and electrifying, sending a rush of warmth down your throat. But warmth is the wrong word. It is more like a spark racing through your veins, a small lightning bolt that insists you straighten your spine. Your senses sharpen, then sharpen again, as if your mind has decided to polish every thought until it gleams. You blink, and the world grows unnervingly crisp. You can see the grain of the wooden table. You can hear the faint hum of distant torches. You can smell ink drying on scrolls somewhere farther down the hall. The astrologer nods approvingly, then takes a sip from his own cup as though trying to keep pace with your clarity. He gestures toward the balcony where the senior astrologers stand beneath the open sky, their robes shimmering in the lamplight. They lift their instruments with ritual precision, adjusting angles and whispering observations to one another. Their movements flow with the grace of people who have spent their entire lives staring upward, mapping the heavens until the heavens feel like an extension of their own thoughts. You move closer to the balcony, drawn by the soft hum of conversation. The stars tonight are brilliant, sharp points of light arranged in patterns that seem to tilt and sway as the earth rolls beneath them. The brew's heat intensifies behind your eyes, and suddenly the constellations appear closer than before. Not physically closer, but more deliberate, more articulate. Their patterns form and reform in ways you have never noticed. The astrologers murmur among themselves, noting subtle shifts with alarming precision. You can almost see the lines they trace between stars. The ark's prediction and mythology have carved across the sky. Your thoughts begin to race. Connections form with unnatural speed. You understand, for a moment, why these brews are guarded with the same security as royal treasures. The liquid sharpens the mind to a point where ideas arrive faster than breath. You feel buoyant, alert, almost weightless. The night seems endless, full of meaning waiting to be sorted into charts and prophecies. You might write 3 treatises before dawn if someone gave you ink, but but the clarity teeters on the edge of overwhelm. You grip the railing, grounding yourself as the astrologers above begin a new chant, reciting star names and calculations that ring through the air like part of the sky's own language. Your breath steadies, the rush eases, the stars settle into their familiar brilliance. When the brew's intensity finally softens, the courtyard grows still again. The astrologers continue their work, tireless and focused, while you feel the lingering hum of clarity fade into something calmer. You realize why these brews were reserved for those tasked with reading the heavens. They do not create wisdom. They simply pry open the mind long enough to glimpse truths too vast to hold in a single moment. You step away from the railing, feeling the warmth drift into your limbs like faint starlight. The palace is quiet now, save for the whisper of quills and the distant murmur of calculations. You walk down the steps, carrying with you not prophecy, but the lingering brightness of a night where the sky felt just a little too close. You enter the courtyard long after sunset, when the wine has already softened every edge of conversation and the air carries the kind of warm laughter that only appears when people forget they are supposed to be dignified. Torches glow along the walls, flickering against columns painted with scenes of gods who look only slightly more composed than the men reclining beneath them. The cushions are arranged in a loose circle around low tables covered with fruit, olives, and cups of wine that have definitely been refilled too many times. But the attention of the room is fixed not on the wine, nor the musicians strumming in the background, but on a set of clay cups that sit in the center like coiled temptation, lotus cups, the infamous ones. You have heard the stories, whispered, with equal parts admiration and caution. Some claim they unlock inspiration. Others insist they loosen the mind until it wanders into places it should not. A few insist that one symposium ended with half the attendees debating philosophy with a potted plant for over an hour. You are not sure which version is accurate. Judging by the atmosphere here, all of them might be. The host, a man who radiates confidence in the way only someone with too much wealth or too little sleep can manage, beckons you over. He lifts one of the cups with theatrical delicacy, as though it contains the distilled essence of genius rather than something scraped from lotus petals steeped much longer than seems reasonable. The mixture inside is pale and slightly viscous, catching the torchlight with a soft glimmer. When he sets it before you, the scent drifts upward, floral with a sweetness sharp enough to prick the inside of your nose. It smells like perfume, poetry, and poor future decisions. You settle onto the cushions as the others lean forward, eager, their eyes bright with the anticipation of watching someone else cross a threshold they themselves crossed long ago. A poet to your left raises his cup in salute. His smile is the kind worn by a man who believes he has seen truths hidden from the rest of the world, though his hair suggests he has been fighting a long battle with gravity. A philosopher on your right mutters something about the mind unfolding like a scroll when properly prompted. You think he means it as reassurance. You lift the cup. The liquid touches your tongue with a taste both delicate and immediate, a rush of sweetness layered with something earthy. It slides down your throat with surprising warmth, settling into your chest like sunlight trapped under your ribs. You exhale, and the world seems to exhale with you. The torches glow brighter. The air hums faintly. The conversations around you sharpen as if each word acquires new weight. The poet begins reciting lines about the sea, about sails catching the breath of gods, about longing stretching across horizons. His voice flows with practiced beauty, but something about it feels more alive tonight, richer, like his words are rising from someplace deeper. You sit quietly, listening, and the warmth inside you spreads into your limbs. The room softens at the edges, the shadows blending into curves. You blink, and the torchlight seems to ripple, moving in slow waves like water stirred by an unseen hand. The philosopher leans close, explaining a theory about the soul, the universe, and the fundamental nature of joy. You cannot fully follow the details, but the cadence of his voice settles over you like a calm tide. The lotus heightens everything. Every sound seems to carry a trail of meaning. Every glance feels weighted with intention. You begin to understand how these cups became legendary. The world does not transform into something new. It simply expands, revealing layers you never noticed beneath the surface of ordinary moments. The musicians shift into a slower melody, their notes weaving through the air like threads of silver. You listen to the lyre's song as it bends gently, each vibration settling into your mind with a soft insistence. The courtyard seems wider than before, as if the walls have leaned back to give the night more room. The sky overhead deepens into velvet, the stars pricking through with curious brightness. Someone presses a cluster of grapes into your hand, and you cannot help but laugh at how the fruit feels almost exaggerated in your palm. Rounder, more vibrant, the color too rich to be real. The laughter spreads, slipping from you into those around you, until the entire group shares a brief moment of pure, effortless delight. No one speaks during it. They simply exist together, suspended in the glow of lotus warmth and flickering firelight. Gradually, the intensity settles, your thoughts quiet, returning to their familiar rhythm. The courtyard regains its normal boundaries. The music softens, the poet leans back, satisfied with his own brilliance, while the philosopher drifts into a contemplative silence that may or may not last until morning. You place your cup on the table, feeling the final traces of lotus warmth pulse gently in your chest. As the night drifts on, you sit among them with a calm you did not expect. The lotus has left you with something subtle, a lingering clarity nestled inside the softness. When you finally rise to leave, the torches sway lightly in the breeze, their glow following your steps, as though acknowledging that for a brief moment, under the warm Mediterranean sky, the world let you glimpse its quieter, sweeter side. You walk through a marble corridor so polished it reflects your sandals with unsettling accuracy, as if the floor is quietly judging your posture. The palace around you is hushed at this hour, not because anyone is asleep, but because silence is the preferred language of philosophers who wander here long after sunset, muttering ideas that seem profound until daylight arrives to dismantle them. The lamps burn low, filling the hall with a golden softness that turns every statue into a thoughtful spectator. Somewhere ahead, you hear voices, quiet, hushed, urgent enough to suggest someone has decided to share something that absolutely must stay secret, yet inevitably will not. You round a corner and see a group of scholars huddled around a low stone bench. Their white robes gather in folds like spilled parchment, their brows furrowed in the manner of men who take themselves seriously but wish the universe would return the favor. At their center lies a small bronze container, no larger than your fist. Its lid is carved with spirals that loop into one another, a motif popular among thinkers convinced that wisdom should always be packaged in confusing patterns. One scholar taps the lid with his fingernail, glancing down the corridor to ensure no one of rank is approaching. When he sees you, he gives a curt nod that implies you have been promoted from observer to participant without asking for it. The scholar lifts the lid. A faint shimmer rises, invisible at first, then catching the lamplight with a soft glint. Inside is a fine powder, pale as chalk but with a strange iridescence that suggests it did not come from any ordinary herb. You heard rumors about this mixture whispered between columns, passed quietly from one sleepless thinker to another. Philosopher powder, the substance that supposedly helps the mind loosen whatever knots life has tied inside it. Some claim it sharpens clarity. Others claim it widens the imagination. A few insist it simply makes everything funny for an hour. The scholars ignore those claims, of course, because laughter is not encouraged unless it comes from smug revelation. They pass the container toward you. The powder smells faintly of crushed petals and old parchment, a combination that suggests it has spent too much time near libraries. You hesitate, but curiosity pushes you forward. You raise the container, inhaling gently as instructed. The powder carries a warmth that spreads along the bridge of your nose before sinking deeper, settling behind your eyes with the slow certainty of ink soaking into papyrus. You exhale and blink as the marble corridor shifts in subtle, improbable ways. The scholars watch carefully, as if assessing whether you will deliver insights or collapse dramatically. You remain upright, which is considered a victory. The lamps brighten slightly, or perhaps your perception sharpens. The statues lining the hall seem less frozen, more expressive in their stillness, their carved eyes glittering as though they are waiting to hear what peculiar thought you will conjure next. The air grows lighter, as if the corridor has gently lifted an invisible weight from your shoulders. The scholars begin debating, and their voices take on a cadence that pulls at your attention. They speak of meaning, of virtue, of the tension between certainty and doubt. Their words ripple through the air with a clarity that surprises you. Concepts you once found slippery now sit before you like calm animals waiting to be studied. You begin to sense connections between ideas you never thought related. A philosopher mentions harmony, and you suddenly see how it threads through action, intention, breath, and even the flickering of the lamps. Another speaks of justice, and you see it as a balance held between countless invisible hands. Your mind expands, not in overwhelming spirals, but in soft, widening circles. The marble floor glows faintly under the lamplight, and the hush of the corridor feels purposeful rather than empty. You feel a gentle rhythm in your thoughts, a pulse that syncs with your breathing. The powder does not force visions. It invites subtle illumination, coaxing ideas into shapes you can finally understand. One scholar asks your opinion on a theory he has been nurturing for years. Normally, his questions strike you as traps, disguised as invitations. Now the answer arrives easily, rising from a place within you that feels both familiar and newly uncovered. You speak, and the words flow in a steady stream, gathering nods from the circle. For a moment you understand why these powders are kept secret. Not because they are dangerous, but because clarity is a currency, and everyone here hoards it like treasure. Gradually the effects soften. The glow dims. The marble returns to its usual stillness. The scholars close the container, murmuring goodbyes as they drift down separate corridors to chase whatever ideas the night left them. You stand alone for a moment in the quiet hall, feeling a faint warmth lingering behind your eyes. The air tastes of dust and secrets. As you walk back toward the outer courtyard, your thoughts settle into gentle order, like scrolls neatly returned to their shelves, carrying with them the faint shimmer of insight that will stay long after the night fades. You march with the Legion long before the sun rises, boots striking packed earth in a rhythm that feels older than the Empire itself. The air is cool enough to cling to your skin, carrying the metallic scent of armor and the dusty bitterness of the road ahead. Your pack is heavy, your shield heavier, and every man around you wears the same expression, determination stretched thin over exhaustion. No one speaks unless necessary. The day will demand enough breath on its own. But beneath the silence lies a secret carried in small leather pouches tucked discreetly into belts and bracers. The stimulants, the little battlefield companions whispered about in barracks and passed quietly between fingers long before dawn. They are not officially sanctioned, of course. The commanders like to pretend their soldiers are powered by patriotism alone. But the veterans know better. The pouches contain herbs, seeds, and ground plant matter mixed into small pellets that taste like determination and soil. You were handed your first one by an older soldier whose face looked carved by too many campaigns. He said you would understand soon enough. You believed him, because his eyes carried the knowledge of someone who had seen sunrise arrive during the wrong part of the battle too many times. Hours later, after endless marching, the column halts near a ridge overlooking a valley where dust already stirs from the movement of distant forces. Armor clinks, horses snort. Someone mutters a prayer under their breath. You feel your shoulders sag, the weight of fatigue settling in your joints. The veteran beside you gives a small nod, barely noticeable, then taps the pouch at his belt. He doesn't need to say anything. You take out one of the pellets. It is small and dark, slightly sticky from the herbs packed inside. You place it on your tongue. The taste is immediately bitter, then sharp, then oddly warm, as though a coal has been struck and tucked behind your teeth. You swallow, and the heat spreads downward, seeping through your chest and sinking into your limbs. Your heartbeat thuds once, twice, then steadies into a stronger rhythm. Your breath deepens. The world sharpens at the edges. The ridge no longer looks like a tiring obstacle. It looks like a starting line. Around you, others take their pellets as discreetly as possible. They stand straighter, their eyes clear. The air itself seems to hum, charged with something electric, though no storm approaches. The banner above you snaps in the wind, and for a moment the colors look brighter, as if freshly painted by the morning. The general rides to the front, raising his spear. You watch him, feeling the stimulant coil energy through your muscles in slow, steady pulses. You understand suddenly how men keep moving across impossible distances, how they push through fear without stumbling. The herbs do not erase exhaustion. They simply persuade your body to stop negotiating with it. When the orders come, the Legion moves with the precision of a single creature. Shields lock. Spears angle forward. Sand kicks up beneath your boots as you descend the ridge. The stimulant heightens your awareness. You hear everything. The scrape of armor, the drumbeat marking your pace, even the distant rattle of enemy shields drifting up from the valley floor. Your senses stretch, widening to hold the entire scene in your mind at once. The feeling is not frenzy. It is focus sharpened to a point. As you close the distance, the stimulant merges with adrenaline, carrying you forward in long, sure strides. The world narrows into motion and instinct. You anticipate movements before they happen, stepping aside just as a crude spear cuts through the air. Your shield absorbs, blows. You do not remember deciding to block. Everything feels fluid, almost graceful, despite the chaos. The herb's heat sits in your chest like a small fire urging you forward, lighting the path through the noise. The battle swells, surges, and finally begins to break. You breathe hard but steady, your thoughts clear despite the dust and shouts. The pellet's power has not vanished, but it has settled into something calmer, guiding rather than pushing. When the fighting slows, you stand with the Legion as the valley thickens with silence once more. The sun has climbed high, and sweat streaks your face, but your body feels strangely unwilling to collapse. Not yet, not until the work is finished. Only when the final horn sounds does the heat in your chest begin to ebb. The clarity softens. Exhaustion creeps back, not all at once but gradually, as though your limbs remember they have limits after all. You wipe dust from your brow, listening to the others breathe, each one coming down from the same invisible height. The veteran catches your eye and gives a faint smile, knowing exactly what you feel. You do not speak. You simply understand. Out here, on roads carved through unfamiliar lands, the pellets are not luxuries. They are bridges over the long, dark stretches between strength and survival. You shoulder your pack, feeling the weight differently now, and follow the Legion onward as the day presses forward across the valley. You stand in the dim interior of a timber hut that smells like damp bark and determination. A cauldron bubbles in the center, the kind of bubbling that suggests either miraculous healing or a disastrous misunderstanding of botany. Medieval healers call it medicine. You call it suspicious. But you are here because your joints ache, your head throbs, and the nearest real doctor is probably somewhere in the next century. So you watch as the healer, a wiry woman with hair like dried moss, stirs her brew with the solemnity of a priest blessing a doomed ship. She tosses in another handful of leaves that look as though they were collected from the bottom of a forest floor where sunlight goes to die. She mutters something about natural vitality, although it sounds more like she is arguing with the leaves themselves. A puff of steam rises, carrying a scent that blends mint, smoke, and the lingering possibility that this mixture was originally created by accident. She gestures for you to breathe it in, and because you are polite, or desperate, or both, you do. The effect is almost immediate. The air hits the back of your throat with a tingling warmth, as though a forest spirit has flicked your larynx just to see what would happen. It is not unpleasant, exactly. More surprising, like walking into a room and forgetting why you went there, except this time the room is your own skull. The healer watches you closely, nodding with the confidence of someone who has seen this brew knock a grown man flat and still considers it a success. She insists it is medicinal, all of it. The leaves, the roots, the odd blossom bobbing at the surface like a drowning ornament. She says it untangles humors, balances energies, clears clouds from the brain. You wonder if medieval healers ever considered that some clouds are useful, like the ones that protect you from the full truth of your daily responsibilities. But she ladles out a wooden cup's worth of the brew and places it in your hands as though offering sacred knowledge disguised as soup. You sip it because saying no feels rude, and also because the smell has already perforated your sinuses. The liquid is hot, rich, and deeply earthy, as though someone liquefied an entire hillside and added a hint of honey out of pity. Your tongue tingles, your throat warms, Your stomach reacts with a tentative wobble before deciding to accept its fate. You sit on the stool she offers, enjoying the sudden sensation of the world, slowing just enough to notice the fine details. The wood grain on the table, the tiny bundle of herbs drying by the fire, the way the shadows sway like tired dancers along the wall. Outside, the forest seems to breathe with you. The wind moves through the pines with a low murmur, and you feel oddly attuned to it all, as if the brew has tuned your senses to the frequency of moss. The healer claims the mixture brings the mind closer to nature, which sounds poetic until you realize you can smell pine sap from across the hut with alarming clarity. She beams at your reaction, convinced her concoction is working exactly as intended. She tells you stories of those who came before you. The villager who drank a single cup and swore he could hear the river whisper advice about his marriage. The blacksmith who felt so invigorated he attempted to race his own horse and was found hours later explaining the meaning of life to a tree stump. The monk who insisted this brew opened a portal to serenity, though his serene expressions always looked suspiciously like mild confusion. You are not sure whether these stories are meant to comfort or distract you, but they do make you feel less alone in your current state of heightened forest awareness. As the brew settles deeper into your system, you feel a softness in your limbs, not weakness, but a kind of calm swagger that makes you believe you could chop wood for hours or nap for days, depending on which idea arrives first. The healer nods knowingly, as though she has guided countless souls through this herbal twilight. She says healing takes many forms, and that the forest gives what the body asks for. You wonder what you asked for exactly, but the thought drifts away like a leaf caught in slow water. Eventually you stand, steadier than expected, and step outside into the clearing. The sun filters through the canopy, painting shifting patterns across your path. You breathe in the fresh air, and it feels as though a new part of your lungs has been installed without your permission. You walk with a looseness in your joints and a newfound appreciation for the odd, unpredictable generosity of medieval medicine. Behind you, the healer returns to her cauldron, already preparing the next batch with the confidence of someone who believes every problem can be solved with enough leaves. You follow the forest path back toward the village, sensing the world with slightly different eyes, as though nature itself has leaned down to whisper something encouraging in your ear. You push open the warped door of the apothecary and immediately question whether entering was a triumph of bravery or a lapse in judgment. The smell hits you first, a layered assault of vinegar, wilted herbs, something sharply metallic, and an undertone of sweat that definitely belongs to a person and not a plant. Every shelf is crowded with jars sealed in haste, bundles of dried plants that look like they surrendered weeks ago, and handwritten labels that read more like desperate suggestions than confident prescriptions. You stand still for a moment, trying to identify any single scent among the chaos, but the air simply smells like fear that was boiled and bottled. The apothecary himself appears from behind a curtain, moving with the jittery energy of someone who has not slept since the last full moon. His eyes are wide, bright with a mix of exhaustion and hope that feels contagious in the least reassuring way. He greets you with a flourish that suggests he still practices bedside manner, even though everyone knows he is just improvising. He asks what ails you, though he barely waits for the answer before rooting through a chest filled with ingredients that would make a forest spirit reconsider its life choices. He explains, with breathless confidence, that he has perfected a concoction for this plague sweeping the city. He calls it a protective tonic, a restorative draft, and a miracle blend all at once. His enthusiasm rises with each title, as though repeating them might make them true. He pulls out jars one by one, crushed petals from flowers that only bloom under full moons, resin from trees that grow along graveyards, vinegar infused with enough garlic to repel every spirit for 3 generations, and bundles of herbs so pungent they seem to vibrate with indignation. He begins to mix them in a clay bowl, grinding them with a stone pestle until the entire room fills with a smell so powerful it could probably travel through solid walls. He adds a splash of wine to brighten the flavor, then another splash because he clearly does not trust the first one. The mixture darkens in color, thickening as he stirs. Steam rises from the bowl, carrying a scent that feels both medicinal and entirely made up. He insists it is supposed to smell like this. You nod because arguing seems pointless. He pours a ladleful of the mixture into a cup carved with crude symbols for protection. You take it reluctantly, holding it with the same caution you would use for a sleeping wasp. The liquid sloshes, releasing waves of pungent aroma that challenge your commitment to staying conscious. You sip it anyway, because everyone else in the city is drinking these things, and at this point, social pressure outpaces common sense. The taste is impossible to categorize. It begins as vinegar, transforms into bitterness, then blossoms into something sweet and strangely floral before collapsing into garlic with a final flourish. It burns slightly, but only in the way that makes your brain light up and demand an explanation. The apothecary watches you with eager anticipation, waiting for any sign that his creation is working. You try to keep your expression neutral, but your eyebrows betray you by attempting to climb off your face. A warmth spreads through your chest, pulsing outward in gentle waves. Your senses sharpen, not dramatically, but enough to notice the texture of the wooden counter, the flicker of candlelight on glass jars, the faint rustle of mice retreating through the walls. You feel strangely alert, as though the concoction has chased your fatigue into a corner and threatened it with a sharp stick. Your throat tingles, your skin prickles faintly, your head feels lighter, but not in the worrying way, more like a heavy curtain has been pulled aside for a moment. The apothecary exclaims triumphantly, convinced this reaction is proof that his mixture is healing you. You are not entirely sure what it is healing, but you do feel different. The panic that usually sits quietly behind your ribs loosens its grip, replaced by a cautious optimism you did not expect. Perhaps this is the real effect of plague-era medicine not curing illness, but giving people something to cling to in a world unraveling faster than anyone can stitch it back together. You finish the cup, handing it back with hands that feel steadier now. The apothecary grins as though he has saved a life, then rushes off to prepare another batch, chanting prayers over the ingredients for good measure. You step outside, letting the fresh air dilute the lingering bouquet of garlic and ambition clinging to your clothes. The street is quiet, the sky is heavy, but you walk with a new steadiness, buoyed by a concoction brewed from equal parts fear, hope, and herbs no one fully trusts. It may not cure the world, but for a fleeting moment, it lifts the weight of it, reminding you why people keep returning to places like this hut of jars and chaos. Because sometimes, in the middle of catastrophe, optimism smells just strange enough to believe in. You walk along a dirt path that winds between fields, gone brittle from too many seasons of worry. The village ahead sits hunched like an old man, protecting a secret he wishes someone else would carry for a while. Everyone here whispers about witches, curses, and herbs that should never be touched, though the whispers grow louder whenever someone's ailments outpace the cures offered by prayer and cold water. You have heard the stories often enough to ignore them, yet today you walk toward the cottage at the edge of the woods, the one everyone avoids despite secretly hoping someone else will visit in their stead. The door creaks open before you even knock. The woman standing there looks nothing like the figure described in panicked testimony. She is wiry, sharp-eyed, and utterly unimpressed by fear. Her hair falls around her shoulders in a tangle of silver and shadow. She studies you as though you are a puzzle she has solved 100 times before. Without a word, she steps aside and motions you in. You follow, because turning back now would only confirm everything the villagers gossip about you behind your back. The cottage smells of earth and dried flowers. Bundles hang from the rafters, each tied with thread in deliberate knots. A cauldron rests over a low fire, but the scent rising from it is warm and herbal rather than sinister. You try not to stare too closely at a jar filled with something that looks suspiciously like glowing moss. She notices anyway and lets out a soft snort, dismissing the drama of it all with a gesture. She prefers practical magic, she says, not the theatrical nonsense men invent when they need someone to blame. She asks what you need, though in truth she already knows. Everyone comes for the same reason. The sickness that no one wants to name aloud, the heaviness that creeps into bones, the sleepless nights that turn faces into pale sketches. The village priests have their rituals. The midwives have their decoctions. But when those fail, people come here, disguising desperation as curiosity. She pulls down a wooden box and sets it on the table. Inside are small bundles of herbs wrapped in linen, each marked with a symbol you do not recognize. She chooses one carefully, humming under her breath as she unwraps it. The scent that escapes is sharp, sweet, and strangely alive, curling around your senses like a curious cat. She crushes the herbs between her fingers, the oils glistening in the firelight, then mixes them in a bowl with honey and something dark that dissolves slowly into the blend. She hands you a cup of the mixture, offering no explanation. You inhale, feeling the warmth rise into your throat. The scent is both familiar and unexpected, like memories you do not remember making. You sip. The taste spreads across your tongue in waves, earthy first, then floral, then warm like sunlight filtered through leaves. It settles into your chest with a quiet heat, easing something you did not realize had been clenched there. She watches you closely, looking for signs only she understands. The room seems to soften around the edges as the mixture works its way through your body. Colors deepen. The fire crackles with a richer sound, each pop settling into your ears like small affirmations. You feel your breath lengthen, drawing deeper into your lungs. The heaviness in your limbs lightens, replaced by a sense of grounded clarity that feels neither magical nor ordinary, but something in between. She begins explaining the herbs, not in terms of curses or miracles, but in simple truths passed through generations of women who were never allowed to be scholars. Some herbs calm the pulse, she says. Some loosen the grip of fear. Some coax the mind into letting go of shadows. None of this is witchcraft, she insists. It is knowledge useful, quiet, powerful, and that is why men fear it. Knowledge can stand on its own. It doesn't need torches or trials to prove anything. You listen, the warmth spreading through your thoughts until the world feels balanced again. The dizziness you arrived with fades. The tension in your neck unwinds. For the first time in weeks, you feel capable of being a person rather than a bundle of symptoms and dread. She pours you another small cup, this one lighter, meant to ease the hour that follows. Outside, wind rustles the leaves like distant applause. You finish the last sip, gentle and steady now. She wraps a small bundle of herbs for you to take, warning you to keep it hidden unless you want half the village accusing you of consorting with darkness. You tuck it into your cloak, suddenly aware of the fragile line between fear and understanding, between superstition and survival. You step back into the forest path, the cool air brushing your face. The cottage door closes behind you with soft finality. As you walk, the world feels lighter beneath your feet, not because of magic or miracles, but because someone dared to understand what others chose to fear. You arrive at the monastery in that strange gray hour before sunrise, when the world feels half awake and the air carries the chill of unfinished dreams. The stone walls rise above you like a fortress built to keep worldly noise out and spiritual confusion in. A bell clangs somewhere deep within the corridors, a sound both solemn and slightly annoyed, as if even the bell resents being awake this early. A monk greets you with a bow, his expression serene in the way only someone who has not spoken to another human in days can manage. He gestures for you to follow. And you do, because the quiet feels heavy with purpose. The corridors are lined with wooden doors, each leading to a chamber where monks kneel over scrolls, grinding pigments or reciting prayers under their breath. The scent of incense curls around you, sweet and smoky, clinging to your cloak as though determined to go home with you. Yet beneath the incense lies another smell, faint but persistent, herbal, sharp, a little too intriguing to be innocent. You notice it grows stronger as you move deeper into the monastery, toward a room the monk calls the contemplation hall. Though the look in his eyes suggests what happens there goes beyond contemplation. Inside, the hall is lit by hundreds of candles arranged on narrow shelves carved into the stone. Shadows dance across the walls in shapes that look almost intentional. A group of monks sits in a circle around a low table, covered in jars, bowls, and bundles of plants that seem too carefully hidden under cloth to be part of the standard religious curriculum. The eldest monk motions for you to sit, his face lined with years of devotion, curiosity, and perhaps a few encounters with whatever is in those jars. He unwraps a bundle of dried leaves and places them into a mortar, crushing them with slow, deliberate movements. The scent blooms immediately, rich and earthy with a hint of sweetness. Another monk adds a dark resin, softening it between his fingers before mixing it in. A third pours a small amount of water from a ceramic jug, turning the mixture into a thick paste. They work wordlessly, with the practiced ease of men who have done this far more often than they will ever admit. One of them murmurs that the mixture quiets the body but opens the mind, though he glances toward the door before saying it, as if expecting someone to object. They scoop the mixture into a small bowl and warm it over a candle until steam begins to rise. The monk beside you gestures for you to breathe gently. You do, and the steam slips into your lungs with surprising softness, bringing with it a warmth that spreads through your chest in widening circles. The scent deepens, layering sweetness with a faint bitterness that lingers at the back of your throat. You exhale, feeling something in your thoughts shift. Not dramatically, but like a door cracking open in a quiet room. Your vision softens at the edges. The candles appear brighter, their flames stretching in slow, graceful arcs. The monks begin chanting softly, their voices blending in a low hum that vibrates through the stone floor. The rhythm settles into your bones, steady and hypnotic. The room feels larger now, as though the walls have pulled back to make space for something unseen. You watch the shadows cast by the candles, and they move with a fluidity that seems too intentional to be coincidence. The warmth climbs behind your eyes. Shapes shift gently as though the air is weaving patterns you were previously too distracted to notice. Colors deepen. The monks' chants take on harmonics that feel layered, like multiple voices hidden inside a single breath. You feel both grounded and lifted, anchored by the weight of the stone beneath you while your thoughts drift outward, expanding into the quiet. The eldest monk speaks, but his voice sounds different now, rounder, resonant, as if echoing from a deeper place. He tells you that visions are not goals but guides, brief visitors meant to illuminate paths rather than dictate them. His words ripple through your mind, settling with surprising clarity. You stare at the candlelight, and it bends into shapes that feel meaningful even if you cannot name the meaning. You sense something vast, gentle, and wordless resting just beyond your reach. The warmth begins to ebb slowly, like the tide drawing back toward the sea. The candles regain their ordinary glow. The chants soften into silence. Your breath steadies, anchored again in your own chest. The monks watch you with calm understanding, their faces free from judgment, as though they have seen countless people stand on the threshold of insight and return quietly to themselves. When you rise, your legs feel steady, your mind clearer than before. Your thoughts arranged in a way that makes the world feel slightly different, slightly wider. The elder hands you a small sachet of dried herbs, tied in simple twine. Not for visions, he says, but for grounding. You tuck it into your cloak, grateful for the balance of both. As you step back into the cool morning air, the sun has begun to rise, washing the horizon in gold. You walk away from the monastery with a quiet certainty that what happened in that hall was not virtue in the traditional sense, nor temptation, but something else. An invitation to see the world with eyes just a little more awake. You arrive at the workshop long after midnight, when most of the city has surrendered to sleep, and the only people still awake are night guards, thieves, and individuals who believe brilliance can be brewed in glass bottles. The door is cracked open, spilling a warm glow onto the cobblestone street. You hesitate for a moment, listening to the muffled clinking inside, then step through as quietly as possible. The air inside is thick with scents that do not cooperate with one another. Lavender battling vinegar, honey wrestling something that definitely should not smell like burning metal, and an undercurrent of citrus that feels like it is trying to escape. The alchemist stands hunched over a cluttered table, muttering to himself in a tone that suggests he is both delighted and terrified by his own ideas. His robes are stained with colors that were never meant for fabric, and his hair curls wildly from too many hours near flames. He greets you with a distracted wave, gesturing at the array of bottles, vials, and jars that glitter in the candlelight. Some contain clear liquid. Others glow faintly, as if harboring opinions. One is bubbling without any visible source of heat. He insists each one is a product of the Renaissance spirit, a celebration of human potential distilled into tinctures that promise genius with just a few drops. He also admits, in a whisper, that results vary. He pulls out a bottle sealed with wax and carved with swirls so ornate they must have been added by someone determined to distract from how questionable the contents were. He explains that this tincture sharpens thought and ignites creativity. He claims it helped one artist complete an entire mural in a single night. He neglects to mention the mural was later described as ambitious and confusing. He pours a small amount into a glass and hands it to you with the reverence of someone offering a relic. The liquid is pale gold, shimmering as you tilt it. You raise it to your nose and inhale a scent that shifts between sweet blossoms and something metallic, like lightning bottled just before it escapes. You sip. The flavor is surprisingly delicate at first, smooth and floral, but then it sharpens suddenly, sending a rush of warmth through your chest and straight up the back of your skull. You blink, and the workshop seems to expand in subtle ways. The candlelight brightens, the shadows deepen, the air feels charged, as if every particle is waiting for you to say something profound. The alchemist claps his hands, delighted. He asks what you feel. You open your mouth and discover your thoughts are racing in every direction at once. Ideas arrive faster than you can examine them. You feel like you could redesign the entire city, write a symphony, and also invent a new method for storing cheese without changing its flavor. It is exhilarating in an alarming way. Your mind glows with possibility, but the glow begins to flicker, shifting unpredictably. You focus on the tools scattered across the table. Their shapes seem too interesting for what they are. A glass rod catches your eye, refracting the candlelight into little rainbows that somehow remind you of philosophical debates you have never had. A coil of copper wire looks like it is trying to teach you mathematics through its spiral. The parchment covered in scribbles suddenly makes perfect sense, though when you lean closer, the scribbles form into patterns that rearrange the moment you try to read them. The alchemist calmly takes notes on your reactions, nodding with satisfaction even as you begin describing how the shadows seem to breathe. He insists this is normal. He claims great minds throughout history experience this same shift in perception before breakthroughs. You have your doubts, especially when a bottle on the shelf trembles slightly without being touched. The warmth inside you intensifies. Thoughts multiply. Everything feels connected. You understand color in a way you never have before. You understand sound. You understand why the alchemist keeps muttering to himself like a man negotiating with his own brilliance. You might be brilliant too, or you might be moments away from knocking over an entire shelf of delicate glass. It is difficult to tell. Slowly the rush begins to ebb, like the tide withdrawing after reaching too far onto the shore. The colors soften, the shadows settle. Your thoughts return to a manageable pace. The workshop stops shimmering and becomes simply cluttered again, full of strange concoctions and half-finished experiments. You exhale, feeling the warmth drain into your limbs, leaving behind a faint pulse of clarity rather than chaos. The alchemist smiles proudly, as though this entire ordeal proves the tincture's success. He offers you a bottle to take home, wrapped in cloth to prevent accidental inspiration at inconvenient hours. You decline politely, unsure your mind is prepared for encore brilliance. He shrugs, uncorking a different vial for his own use, humming as though chaos is simply the price of progress. You step back into the cool night, breathing air that feels blessedly ordinary. The stars overhead shimmer with their usual distance, and the quiet of the city settles around you like a calming hand. You walk away from the workshop with a mind still buzzing faintly, grateful for the flicker of genius you tasted, and even more grateful that it has dimmed enough to let you walk in a straight line again. You travel with them because the horizon keeps widening, and no one else seems foolish enough to follow it. The explorers march ahead with the confidence of men convinced the world is filled with undiscovered wonders instead of obvious hazards. They carry maps that are mostly blank, compasses that do not always behave, and an unwavering belief that anything growing, crawling, dripping, or bubbling in the wilderness is meant to be tasted. You walk slightly behind them, partly for safety, partly to maintain emotional distance from whatever strange botanical impulse strikes next. The jungle closes in around you, thick with humidity and the buzzing insistence of unseen insects. Every leaf glistens with moisture. Vines hang like ropes waiting for someone to trip over them. Scents drift through the air in heavy waves, some sweet, some sharp, some alarmingly similar to old boots left in a cellar. The explorers inhale deeply, delighted, as though this aromatic chaos is simply nature's invitation to start snacking. The first encounter happens with a cluster of berries so aggressively purple they look artificial. One explorer plucks a handful immediately, ignoring your warning and chewing with the determined optimism of a man eating future bragging rights. His face brightens, then darkens, then brightens again. He claims he feels electrified by possibility, though his sudden enthusiasm for climbing a nearby tree suggests the berries are doing significantly more than sparking possibility. The others cheer, immediately grabbing handfuls. You step back, silently preparing for disaster. It arrives quickly when the tree climber begins shouting panoramic observations about the meaning of fruit while swaying dangerously on a branch. Hours later, after coaxing him down and waiting for the purple glow in his pupils to fade, you continue onward. The explorers remain undeterred, as if the forest had given them encouragement instead of consequences. They carry on with the same logic that has guided them for weeks. If the world offers something mysterious, it would be rude not to swallow it. Next comes a patch of mushrooms sprouting along a fallen log, their caps patterned like intricate mosaics. One explorer crouches, sniffing with the concentration of a scholar. He declares they smell philosophical. Before you can argue, he pops one into his mouth. The others follow because group decisions here are made through reckless camaraderie rather than wisdom. Moments later, the philosophical mushroom eater begins explaining in great detail how the forest is having emotional reactions to your presence. Another explorer insists he can taste colors now. A third becomes fascinated by the sound of his own heartbeat, listening with the intensity usually reserved for epic poetry. The forest watches all of this in silent amusement. Eventually, the mushroom effects ebb, leaving the group exhausted and slightly embarrassed. Though not embarrassed enough to reconsider their habits, they march on with renewed determination, convinced the next discovery will be the one worth writing down. You try to appreciate the scenery, though it becomes challenging when one explorer stops every few paces to sniff the air and ask if anyone else hears music coming from the ferns. As evening approaches, you reach a marsh where strange flowers bloom along the water's edge. Their petals glow faintly in the dusk, pulsing with gentle bioluminescence. The explorers freeze, mesmerized by this new spectacle. You already know what comes next. One of them kneels, touches a petal, and announces that if the flower glows, the experience surely will too. Without hesitation, he tears off a piece and places it on his tongue. You close your eyes, counting to 3 before the others follow suit. The effect arrives gradually. The glowing intensifies in their faces first, subtle at the edges, then radiating outward until their skin carries a soft sheen like moonlit water. They gasp in wonder, watching their own hands sparkle faintly. They laugh, amazed at their luminous fingertips, waving them around like enchanted fireflies. You sigh, stepping a few paces back to avoid becoming collateral illumination. The light fades as the moments pass, leaving the explorers exhilarated and slightly dazed. They agree, unanimously, that this discovery was worth the misfires of the day. They add that the world must surely be filled with more glowing things, more mysterious berries, more philosophical mushrooms, more wonders waiting just beyond the next bend. You follow them as the darkness settles, guided not by rational decisions but by their persistent, irresponsible awe. Because despite their questionable methods, they stumble into truths no one else would find. You walk behind them through the shifting shadows, knowing that tomorrow they will consume something else entirely, and you will once again brace yourself for whatever chaotic brilliance unfolds. You set foot on the docks just as the mist lifts from the water, revealing ships lined like restless giants waiting for their next command. The air carries the sharp tang of salt, tar, and something else that clings to your clothes long after you leave, the scent of cargo that has quietly rearranged the world. You step closer to the bustling activity, watching sailors unload crates stamped with symbols meant to look official, though everyone knows the real power is hidden inside the wood and rope. Empires rise and fall on far stranger things than gold, and you are about to witness exactly how. A merchant approaches you, his coat fine enough to suggest status, but worn enough to suggest he has slept in it more than once. He gestures toward the crates with a flourish too practiced to be honest. He calls these goods trade. He calls them opportunity. He does not mention that entire kingdoms have learned to fear the contents, nor that the sea routes carved to carry them have reshaped coastlines and consciences alike. But you can see it in the way his fingers tremble, as if even he cannot fully separate profit from the truth. The sailors pry open a crate, revealing packets wrapped tightly in cloth and sealed with resin. The smell escapes first, faint but unmistakable, drifting through the air like a whispered temptation. It is a scent that has traveled farther than most people will ever dream, crossing oceans to settle into new lands, changing them quietly, then violently, then irreversibly. You watch as the merchant picks up a packet, holding it with remarkable reverence for something so small. He explains, in a tone bordering on sermon-like, that the product brings clarity, energy, inspiration. He insists it fuels economies, stabilizes trade, and fills the coffers of empires. He neglects to mention the cost, but you can sense it in the stories swirling through the port. Towns emptied, soil depleted, families fractured beneath the weight of something that arrived in their lives without warning. You hear it in the uneasy rhythm of the docks, the hurried steps of men paid to keep questions from rising too loudly. You follow the merchant into a warehouse, where more crates stand in towering rows. Workers move quickly, sealing, stacking, binding shipments destined for ports marked on maps with confident lines. You walk past tables where the substance is dried, chopped, or prepared for transport. The air inside is thick with its aroma, heavy enough to settle into your lungs as if determining whether you are friend or foe. The workers avoid your eyes. They have seen too many people come and go, each convinced they understand what they are handling until the consequences sweep across distant shores. One worker offers you a sample in a gesture meant to appear casual. You hesitate, but curiosity presses forward before caution can object. You lift the small portion to your lips. The taste is sharp, earthy, and faintly bitter, clinging to your tongue with an intensity that does not immediately fade. It spreads through your chest, warm at first, then cool, then strangely invigorating. Your thoughts sharpen. The warehouse brightens. The shadows seem clearer, more defined. You inhale again, feeling a faint buzz settle into your fingertips. For a moment, you understand why continents bowed beneath the influence of such a substance. It creates movement where there was stillness, ambition where there was exhaustion, hunger for more even when enough should have been sufficient. The world does not seem gentler after consuming it, but it seems filled with more angles, more possibilities, more paths spinning outward from a single moment. But the warmth shifts. It flickers. The clarity sharpens too far, narrowing your thoughts into razor-like corridors. The warehouse becomes too loud, the workers' movements too swift. You step back, grounding yourself as the sensation crests and then begins to soften. You realize that what you felt was only a faint echo of what has driven nations into frenzy, an echo powerful enough on its own. The merchant smiles knowingly as the effects fade from your pulse. He speaks of demand in distant markets, of ships waiting to carry the shipments toward expanding horizons. He speaks of influence in the way others speak of weather, inevitable, shifting, unstoppable. You hear the pride in his voice. You also hear the fear tucked beneath it, a fear he would never admit even as it guides every decision he makes. As you step back into the open air, the docks feel different. The sea breeze sweeps away the lingering taste on your tongue, but not the weight of what you witnessed. You see the crates for what they are. Not goods, not opportunities, but catalysts, substances that turn tides of history, leaving behind both wealth and ruin in equal measure. You walk along the shoreline as the sun rises, the world brightening into a day shaped by choices made in warehouses like this one. And as gulls cry overhead and waves lap against the ships, you understand that the true cargo carried across these waters was not substance or profit, but power, quiet, potent, and utterly relentless in its reach. You board the ship before dawn, the deck slick with sea spray, and the sky still the color of old parchment. The crew moves around you with the slow coordination of men who have spent more of their lives on water than land. They speak in grumbles and half-formed sentences, but their hands are sure as they coil ropes and check rigging, You follow their movements closely, noticing something else beneath their routine. A kind of sharpened alertness that feels out of place for an hour, when even gulls struggle to stay awake. It begins with a sailor leaning against a barrel, chewing something wrapped in a scrap of cloth. His jaw works steadily, his eyes widening as though the horizon has just whispered its secrets to him. He catches you watching, grins with more enthusiasm than anyone should possess at this hour, and taps the cloth. He calls it Sailor's Spark. He claims it chases off exhaustion, keeps the mind sharp, and warms the blood when the wind tries to freeze it. Another sailor overhears and laughs, insisting the spark also makes you swear every wave is conspiring against you. A third man joins in, muttering that the mixture is older than piracy itself and probably invented by someone who misunderstood what plants are meant to do. Curiosity wins. After the morning's chores are done, one of the crew hands you a small bundle. Inside is a wad of leaves and dried root, crushed together into something that looks decidedly unappetizing. The smell hits you first, sharp, peppery, and just faintly sweet, like a garden that rolled down a hill and learned ambition on the way. You place it between your teeth and bite down carefully. The taste erupts immediately, flooding your mouth with bitterness that burns into warmth, then settles into a strange tingling that spreads across your tongue. The effect unfurls slowly, creeping from your jaw to your chest, then outward to your limbs. Your pulse steadies, then quickens just enough to feel purposeful. The cold morning air feels less intrusive. The deck seems clearer, the lines of the ship more deliberate. The crew moves with renewed vigor, hauling ropes and adjusting sails with the efficiency of men who have replaced sleep with something far more aggressive. The captain strides across the deck with the energy of someone who has consumed 3 bundles of spark and argues regularly with storms. His coat flaps dramatically behind him even when the wind is too gentle to justify it. He shouts commands with crisp certainty, pointing toward the shifting horizon where clouds gather like conspirators. The crew obeys, their movements rhythmic and fierce, fueled by a mixture that seems to blur the line between necessity and tradition. As the ship cuts through the waves, the spark heightens everything. Your senses widen. The creak of wood beneath you becomes music. The salty spray becomes refreshing rather than bracing. The gulls circling overhead look almost majestic, which is a sure sign the mixture is doing something unusual. Even the endless blue of the sea feels sharper, its depths shimmering with more shades than you remember the ocean possessing. The sailors speak freely now, stories spilling out of them with reckless enthusiasm. One tells you about a voyage where the crew survived a week-long storm by chewing spark until they felt invincible. Another insists pirates favored the mixture before boarding enemy ships, claiming it gave them the clarity to dodge blades and the courage to pretend they were immortal. Someone else confesses he once chewed so much spark that he spent an entire night debating with the mast about destiny. The spark's warmth shifts again. The clarity deepens, but so does the edge of exhilaration drifting beneath it. You grip the railing as the ship tilts over a swell, the world tilting with it. The wind rushes past your ears, humming like an old tune. You feel alive in a way that is both empowering and mildly concerning, as though your bones have remembered something your brain is still deciding whether to approve. Hours pass in a blur of waves and laughter and work made easier by the glow thrumming beneath your skin. Eventually, the spark begins to fade, gently at first, then more insistently. The tingling in your jaw softens. The crisp clarity melts into something quieter. Your limbs grow heavier, reminded that they belong to a body that has limits, no matter how loudly the ocean encourages otherwise. The sailors notice the shift immediately. They slow their movements just slightly, their bright chatter dimming into more measured conversation. The captain's dramatic coat flaps become less theatrical. Someone offers you water, patting you on the shoulder with a knowing grin that suggests you handled your first spark better than some. As the sun sinks into the horizon and paints the waves with orange and gold, you stand at the bow, watching the sea breathe beneath the fading light. The spark has left your blood, but a trace of its warmth lingers, like embers tucked beneath ash. You understand now why sailors used it, why pirates chewed it before raids, why captains relied on it when the ocean threatened to swallow everything. It was never just a stimulant. It was courage distilled into leaves, clarity disguised as bitterness, resilience wrapped in cloth and slipped into the pockets of men who lived at the mercy of tides. You close your eyes, feeling the ship rock gently, and breathe in the brine-soaked air as the day drifts quietly toward night. You push open the narrow shop door with the caution of someone entering a place where secrets are traded more often than coins. The bell above you gives the faintest ring, but the apothecary doesn't look up. He is bent over a mortar, grinding something with a focus so intense it feels like you have walked into a confession you were never meant to witness. Shelves tower above you, stacked with jars that glow faintly in the lantern light, powders labeled in handwriting so cramped it seems afraid of being read. The air is dense with spice, smoke, and a sweetness that carries the promise of possibility and the threat of consequences. The apothecary finally glances your way, eyes sharp, smile subtle. He motions you forward without a word, as though he knows exactly why you're here, even if you aren't entirely sure yourself. He pulls a small wooden box from beneath the counter and sets it in front of you. The lid is carved with symbols that look decorative until you notice the faint burns along the edges, like someone once tried to destroy it and then changed their mind. He taps the lid once, with a finger stained a permanent shade of amber. He calls it insight. He calls it courage. Then, in a lower voice, he calls it the quiet beginning of change. When he opens the box, you see packets wrapped in cloth, each tied with twine, each containing powder that shimmers faintly as though the air itself is reacting to it. He picks up one pouch, loosens it, and lets you smell the contents. The scent is bright, almost citrus at first, then deepens into something earthy and comforting, with a strange sharpness that nudges at the back of your thoughts. He explains that the mixture clears the mind, sharpens instincts, and awakens conviction. He avoids words like rebellion, but the silence after his explanation suggests them anyway. You are not the first person to stand in this dim shop, listening as he names ingredients he refuses to translate. He tells you scholars swear the powder helps them read truth between lines of text. He tells you artists claim it makes color brighter. He tells you laborers say it makes them willing to speak about injustices they once endured quietly. His tone is gentle, but his eyes carry the weight of the stories he does not share. He prepares a small dose for you, mixing the powder with warm water in a cup carved from bone. The steam rises in soft spirals, brushing your face with a scent that feels like a memory you haven't lived yet. You lift it, take a cautious sip, and the warmth spreads instantly, unfurling through your chest, settling into your limbs like new breath. The taste is complex, bright, bitter, soothing. It moves through your thoughts in widening circles, loosening knots you didn't know existed. The apothecary watches quietly as your senses shift. Your awareness sharpens, not in the frantic way of stimulants, but with a steady, glowing clarity. The cluttered shelves suddenly make sense. Each jar placed with intention, the lantern light seems to hum with a softer frequency. You feel grounded, yet expanded, as though your thoughts have stepped into a larger room. You understand why people whispered about this place, why patrons arrived at dawn with heavy hearts and left with eyes that gleamed differently. You hear distant voices outside, muffled street sounds layered with something else. Determination, frustration, hope. The powder doesn't create ideas. It amplifies the ones already coiled inside you, giving them shape and permission. You remember grievances spoken quietly in taverns. You recall neighbors lowering their voices when discussing taxes, or shortages, or laws passed while citizens slept. You see threads connecting, forming patterns that had always been there but never fully visible. The apothecary places a pouch into your hand. He doesn't charge you. Instead, he tells you to share it only with those who already carry the spark. He says the powder is not for thrill seekers or dreamers without direction. It is for the ones who feel the ground shifting beneath them and need the courage to decide whether to stand or push back. The effects soften as you step outside, but the clarity lingers. The street feels different, the night air sharper. You see people gathered at corners, whispering urgently. You see lanterns burning later than usual. You see tension in the posture of passers-by. The city is waking up, not violently, but quietly, in subtle waves, each ripple reaching another household, another heart. You walk through the streets with the pouch hidden beneath your cloak. Every step feels deliberate. every thought steadier than the last. This is not chaos disguised as medicine. It is conviction disguised as powder. You realize why the apothecary works alone, why his door stays unmarked, why revolutions rarely begin with shouts. Sometimes they begin with a sip, a breath, and a decision made in the quiet. You find yourself walking into a tiny boutique shop, wedged between a smoothie bar and a yoga studio. The kind of place where the sign simply says botanicals in loopy handwriting that promises enlightenment or a refund depending on your attitude. The door creaks softly as you step inside, and immediately your nose fills with a swirl of scents that feel suspiciously intentional. Dried citrus peel, old paper, incense, smoke, and something earthy that reminds you of damp soil after a rainstorm. It is not unpleasant, just unexpected, as though the air itself has been curated. Shelves line the walls, each cluttered with jars labeled with names that straddle the line between poetic and cryptic. Ancient Blend, Dream Root, Temple Bloom, Revival Leaf. Most of the labels insist these mixtures are based on long-lost traditions rediscovered through careful study, though you suspect careful study might actually mean enthusiastic guessing. A young attendant appears from behind a beaded curtain, wearing a linen apron and an expression of calm intensity that suggests they meditate more often than they sleep. They greet you warmly and ask what kind of inner journey you are seeking today, which is somehow both flattering and alarming. You explain you are curious. They brighten immediately, as though curiosity is the preferred currency here. They begin describing mixtures recreated from archaeological notes, oral histories, and the occasional mural that scholars swear depicts ritual use of something vaguely botanical. They talk about ancient wanderers, shamans, monks, sailors, all united by a shared human urge to alter consciousness in the name of clarity, comfort, or simply curiosity. You listen as they describe each blend with reverence, their voice drifting like incense through the cramped space. They eventually pick up a small tin shaped like a flattened pebble. Inside is a powder the color of desert sand mixed with crushed petals. They explain it comes from a recipe traced to an ancient desert community, though the word traced is doing most of the work in that sentence. You lean in and sniff. The fragrance is soft, sweet, and slightly spicy, like a memory trying to bloom. The attendant says this blend is meant to bring calm without sedation, inspiration without overwhelm, presence without pressure. They say ancient people used it for meditation, storytelling, and rituals that sometimes blur the line between spiritual and recreational. You accept a small sample, partly because you are curious and partly because refusing feels like declining a handshake with history itself. You mix the powder with warm water as instructed. The drink glows slightly when you stir it, though that could simply be the reflection of the shop's ambient lighting, which is suspiciously flattering. You raise the cup to your lips, breathe in the scent, and take a slow sip. The taste unfurls across your tongue, warm and earthy with a surprising lift of citrus. The warmth spreads gently through your chest, radiating outward in steady waves that feel neither quick nor forceful. It settles behind your eyes with a calm clarity, tuning the world into soft focus while sharpening the details you want to notice. You breathe slowly and realize you are paying attention to the rhythm of your own inhale, something you rarely do unless prompted by someone holding a yoga mat. The shelves seem slightly brighter. The jars glimmer with a kind of quiet significance. You feel a soft hum beneath your skin. Not excitement exactly, but a sense of subtle awakening, as though your mind is stretching after a long nap. You understand why people are drawn to rediscovering ancient highs. Not for thrill, not for escape, but for connection to the past, to the earth, to experiences that remind them they are more than the sum of their schedules. The attendant watches you with the calm satisfaction of someone who has guided many people through this exact moment. They hand you a small card explaining the historical context of the blend. Though you notice it leaves plenty of room for interpretation, they offer to show you other rediscovered mixtures, each tied to different cultures, different eras, different states of mind. You nod, feeling grounded, steady, and unusually present. As the effects settle into a soft glow, you step outside with the small tin tucked into your pocket. The air feels cooler, the street sounds clearer, the world seems unchanged, yet you perceive it with a touch more gentleness, a touch more curiosity. Ancient highs, it turns out, are less about escaping reality and more about seeing it from an angle you forgot existed. You walk down the street with slow steps, carrying the quiet secret that the past is never as distant as it seems. You find yourself standing in a dusty archive room tucked beneath an old museum, a place where sunlight barely dares to enter and every shelf feels heavy with secrets. The air smells faintly of parchment, stone, and the kind of forgotten spices that cling to history like stubborn passengers. You came here expecting dull records, lists of artifacts, maybe a broken pot or two. Instead, you sense the quiet thrum of something waiting, as though the past is holding its breath in anticipation of curious hands. A curator ushers you deeper into the labyrinth of shelves. She moves with the practiced steps of someone who knows exactly where everything is hidden, even when the labels pretend otherwise. She whispers as though the documents might wake up if she raises her voice too much. She speaks of discoveries no one has named publicly, substances hinted at in travel logs, temple inscriptions, even marginal notes from scholars who clearly wanted to write more but feared they might accidentally start a trend. She stops at a drawer that looks no different from the others, yet radiates the distinct energy of an unopened chapter. Inside are small packets wrapped in brittle cloth. Some are sealed with wax cracked from age. Others are tied with faded string. Each is marked with a symbol whose meaning has either been lost or deliberately obscured. She lifts one packet with careful hands and hands it to you. It is lighter than you expect, nearly weightless, as though whatever once lived inside it has shifted into something more elusive than matter. You unfold the cloth slowly, half expecting dust to scatter. Instead, you find a residue that glimmers faintly in the dim light, a soft iridescence pressed into the very weave of the fabric. The curator explains that it was found in a merchant's chest discovered beneath an abandoned desert outpost. The merchant wrote about a powder that made desert nights feel like they spoke in dreams. No recipe, no ingredients. Just that one cryptic line and a warning to never mix it with heat. She says the scholars still argue whether it was medicinal, recreational, or simply poetic exaggeration. You inhale gently, the scent barely present, yet layered with a sweetness that feels like distant memory. She leads you to another drawer containing a fragment of bamboo etched with tiny marks. The translation pinned beside it is shaky, full of academic guesswork, but the message is clear enough. A brew prepared during certain moon phases, meant to heighten intuition before crucial decisions. The ingredients are listed only by metaphor: the root that hides beneath silence, the leaf that drinks starlight, the flower that shifts its color when spoken to. You try to imagine these plants existing anywhere other than imagination, but something in the etching suggests they once were real enough to influence someone's fate. Another shelf holds a jar dug up from a ruined mountain shrine. Its lid remains sealed, though the contents inside whisper against the glass when tilted slightly. No one dares open it. The label beside it cites villagers who once claimed the shrine's guardians used a smoke that coaxed honesty from the reluctant and confessions from the guilty. You stare at the jar and feel a faint hum beneath your fingers, as if whatever lies within is paying attention. The curator pulls out a final box, its hinges rusted but intact. Inside are scrolls so fragile she barely touches them. They describe a region where travelers drank from a river that ran with minerals so potent the water itself seemed to shift moods. Some travelers reported feelings of intense clarity, others startling vivid dreams. Still others moments of insight they could never fully articulate afterward. The river dried centuries ago, leaving behind only these fragments and arguments about whether the stories were literal, metaphorical, or somewhere in the liminal space between. She closes the box gently, then steps back, watching you with an expression that carries both caution and encouragement. She says history is full of substances that shaped cultures quietly, their presence known only to a few. Some were used sparingly, some were hidden deliberately, some vanished without explanation, leaving behind only residue and rumors. The question, she says, is not whether they existed, but whether someone will ever rediscover them. As you walk through the rows of shelves, the air feels charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. You imagine ancient hands grinding roots, travelers sipping unfamiliar brews beneath foreign stars, Scholars scribbling notes while wrestling with ideas too strange to share openly. You imagine small discoveries waiting in soil and scroll, hiding patiently through wars and rebuilding, waiting for someone curious enough to pick up the thread again. You reach the staircase and look back one last time. The archive sits in stillness, shelves lined with mysteries wrapped in cloth and wax, as though offering a quiet invitation, not to recreate the past exactly, but to understand the strange, flickering corners of human experience that history only hints at. You step into the light, aware that you are leaving with more questions than answers, and that this, somehow, feels exactly right.